This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1715, a cornucopia of comic conversation.
I'm Adam Murdo.
I'm Kevin Moyer.
I'm Shane Kelly.
I'm Ian Levinstein.
And I'm Chris Everly.
And Aquaman!
Let go my amigo.
Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is our annual cornucopia of comics conversation, all-encompassing, multi-topic, rambling gabfest. And as befits a Thanksgiving holiday-themed episode, we've got the whole extended, well, not the whole family, as many as we could round up on short notice, but we've got 3 full-fledged geeks in the studio here and 2 more on the line. We've got cousin Ian Levinstein from the Comic Timing Podcast with us. How are you doing, Ian?
I'm good, and now I feel like that character you bring on in the last season.
That's right.
You're our shark jump.
Your cousin, what's his nuts
Oliver.
from Oliver. Cousin
Yes.
Oliver.
See, I knew exactly which what's his nuts you were talking about.
What's his nuts?
That's how you know this.
That's my new nickname.
Yeah, what's his nuts?
Cousin what's his nuts. And we've got crazy Uncle Kevin Moyer here with us, too.
Well, God, how you doing out there? Cool. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Brother.
Our pleasure, Kevin. Yep, we have, well, a few of us here in the room have seen a bit of Kevin recently because we helped him move his entire comic collection from old house to new.
Some helped more than others, and that's okay.
Holy shit.
We forgive you, Shane.
My God.
How many books is it now, Kevin?
Dude, I have no idea. It is... I didn't... You know what? We even lost count. I wanted to make sure we counted. But it's I think, over 65 long boxes.
Oh, my God.
And
I thought it was
That
52.
many, wow.
And I
Holy
have...
crap.
There are a lot of
There's
short boxes,
Yeah,
too.
there's probably about another 8 short boxes yet besides.
Holy.
Bottom line, added up equals too goddamn many. That's what it is. And I ain't moving them again.
Yeah.
I'll set a torch to them before I move them again.
Myself, I'm inclined to believe that there's no such thing as too many comics. But
No, I know,
I did
but you
too,
know,
back 20 years ago. Now I'm not so sure.
yeah, for me, no. Yeah, you kind of change your tune after a while. And you know, to be honest, actually, I want to donate some and do something with some of them because, I mean, it's just, you know, there's no value in probably like 2/3 of them. You know what I mean? It's just, you know, all that stuff from all over the years, it just has no value anymore. It's, you know, but, you know, I did throw some stuff away, you know, but...
The owner of a company that I worked for right out of high school, he since has passed away, but there was one time I was driving with him in a car, and we had this conversation about, he said, do you ever think you'll ever get rid of any comics? I'm like, no, never. I'll keep all of them and grow this collection. It'll be monumental.
my substance shall increase ever greater.
I would love to sit down and talk to him and go, you know what, man, you were right.
Yeah.
I started dumping them a while ago. And not in a bad way, just I limited space, limited time. I had to purge.
It's just too much stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it meant something before, but...
Yep,
you know,
yep.
Yep, you two guys on the line have had some purging experiences within the recent past, too, haven't you?
Most definitely, yeah. I mean, I'm still getting rid of comics. In fact, I have an entire collection from when I was growing up still at my mom's place.
Oh my God!
That I have to get through. And half of them don't even have backing boards. I'm sure they're in horrible condition. I'll have to go through them at one point and be what's worth salvaging and selling, and what's just worth giving away to wherever I can give it away to. But it's just so easy to collect things online now, with digital and whatnot, especially with the sales. Like right now, I just bought a digital copy of Multiversity Deluxe for $5 at C's current Comixology sale going on. So you can't beat stuff like that.
So, and that's a collection of all the Multiversity one-shots.
That's a collection of the entire Multiversity as it was coming out by Morrison. Yep.
Wow.
That is a heck of a deal.
I've actually found, a couple of years ago, I found some people selling online DVDs that they burned of scanned comic runs. And I mean, I bought, I think I placed an order, and I don't remember how much I spent, but I got quite a few DVDs, and it's like I got a full run of Superman, Miracle Man, Spider-Man, Daredevil.
Wow.
I mean, Green Lantern. I mean, it's like, and they're all on DVD. It's like that's my comic collection now. It's like it's like between the stuff you can buy and the things like that you can find, because that's what I started trying to buy DVDs of stuff that isn't so readily available digitally.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they already did all the work. You know what I mean? It's like you just a couple bucks for a DVD and you got a whole run of books. 400 comics. Boom.
If that's your comic collection now, what did Matt and I schlep up the 3 flights of
Well,
stairs to your house?
Exactly. That's why I have those DVDs, because now the books can go. So that way, if I want to read any of the stuff, I have most of it on DVD.
I just went and got a library card at one of the local libraries.
That's
and
to be encouraged.
Downloaded what the heck's it called? Habaloo?
Oh yeah. I wish New York
Hoopla.
Public Library would get off their butts and be a part of that, because that's one of the few digital exchanges they're not a part of yet.
Yep, it's Hoopla. And they've got a pretty good trade collection going on. You can search a lot of stuff.
Wow.
And you get 5 downloads a month of any books, movies, whatever. But yeah, I got it just for the trade paperback comic book stuff. It's
It's neat that stuff like that's available. I mean,
Yeah.
like Shang-Chi. I mean, that was supposedly never going to ever be reprinted. So I bought a DVD, and it had every Shang-Chi comic on it. And now they brought out the omnibus, but I don't buy omnibus books.
No,
so
I don't
They're
really
too freaking
either.
big. But
Yes, they are.
if they put them out in the trade or something, I'd buy them. But now at least I can buy them and read them all. I never read them all. So
Well, there's a hardcover now. There may be a soft cover tomorrow.
I would, like those epic collections and stuff like that they've been doing lately.
Yeah.
But that's the stuff I'd like to, that's what I like about that. I can find stuff like that on those DVDs. It's stuff that I can't find collected or anything like that, or if it's stuff that's out of print or, things like that. So
Sure. Yeah.
Much to be said for that if you don't mind consuming your comics digitally. And for me, I just prefer to have my good old pieces of paper in front of me to feel and to smell.
There's still something to be said for that.
I mean, I still like my trade. I like to sit down with a trade and read, or something like that. But yeah, I don't want to sit in front of same thing with reading novels. I still haven't converted to reading a novel on a Kindle or something like that. I still buy the book and read it. But I just can't sit and stand to look at a computer screen for, hours on end.
If I didn't have an iPad, it wouldn't be so easy. I wouldn't like doing it on a computer. It has to be handheld.
But I mean, if there's stuff that that's not collected and I can get it on a DVD, well then I'll sit down and read issues on the computer. But yeah, I like to sit down with a trade. I think it's comforting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No denying that. And at Thanksgiving time, we like to think about comfort food or the reading equivalent thereof.
Absolutely.
I'd have to get up my JSA, JLA, Virtue and Vice.
That's right. That's a good story.
Good, and also Thanksgiving theme.
Uh-huh.
Well, I guess it's time to sit down at the table and get down to business here. As the first topic, as agreed upon before we began recording for this Jawpalooza about comic books,
Love it.
It's the best I could do.
It's awesome, dude.
Yes, we do have a bit of a sad event that has rocked the geek community that took place within the past week and a half or so, real time before the recording of this episode. The passing of one of the true giants of the comic book field, Mr. Stan Lee. And since it was Chris's idea that we take some time to honor the man here on our podcast, I'd like to throw the ball to him first. So, Alderman Eberly, would you please ascend the dais and commence the eulogy?
Yeah. Thank you, brother. Alderman Eberly, Murd. God, I love you.
It was the only secular sort of officiant title that I could think of.
Yeah, I feel like I should be trying to, bribe for votes in Atlantic City in the 20s now or something. Outstanding. Well done.
Boardwalk Empire.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Stan was 95, so I don't think anybody was shocked that he passed away. He was he was very elderly. Mm-hmm. But having said that, there was a part that I always felt like this guy's just going to live forever. Because just something about the persona and the exuberance, it just always felt like, and for me it was always comforting, like Stan Lee's always out there. And so when I think about the mystique of Stan Lee, obviously you kind of separate that from like the frail elderly man who passed away just about a week ago. But I was thinking just since then, what Stan Lee meant to me. As many listeners know, I'm a big Marvel guy. I read DC a lot too, but I really grew up reading Marvel and deeply fell in love with that universe and those characters. And we continue to talk about that in our spotlights and so forth. But I was thinking about, for me, Stan fills so many different roles in my life growing up as a reader and a consumer of popular culture. And I think for me, it all goes back to, once again, origins of Marvel Comics, which we all know is one of the fireside books they did in the 70s, where they would reprint. It's one of the first times I saw comic books reprinted in like a bound book. Reprint it first appearances and then other classic stories for each character, and he wrote a little essay in between describing the genesis of each character. And of course, I was given the book by family friends when I was a kid. I was pretty young, and I didn't know who Stan Lee was. So at first, I just read the comics. I kind of ignored the essay. Like, I don't want to read the essays. I'll read the comics. And then I fell in love with the book and the different stories, and I read it, dog-eared it and so forth. And then eventually started, I'll read these essays too. And I automatically was just smitten with this character who was speaking to me about creating these comics. Now, of course, as I got older, I realized, okay, this is his version of those events, and this is not the whole story, and Kirby and Ditko and so forth. But as a kid, let's say I was 10, 11, 12 years old, it was so thrilling to read about someone who was making these comics even more exciting, because he was kind of like doing this Wizard of Oz. Let's pull back the curtain. I'm going to show you how he produced these things. The hyperbole and the grandiose language, and kind of talking like he's like almost like a hip professor you want to hang out with, after class, that type of thing. And I was just totally smitten with this persona. And as I started to read more and more comics, I'd see Stan Lee Presents at the top, and read his bullpen bulletins page and back issues, and I just really just fell in love with this world he was encouraging us all to be a part of. And as I read, and as I got older, I got to sort of hunt down back issues, trades, or floppies of all Silver Age stuff. Well, obviously much of which was scripted by him. And Stan Lee, for me, he became several things. He became a teacher. One of the reasons why I have what I consider, a pretty strong vocabulary is because I read Stan Lee scripted comics. And what I've always noted and always go back to is in a lot of his stories, especially as you get into the latter 60s, he was purposely putting in higher level vocabulary. Like always the joke with me is how much I would love the word Inglenook, right? And I learned that in a Spider-Man comic describing Peter and Harry's pad. I think of a word like perambulate, which I learned in a Captain America comic. I mean, he was putting words in there that were a high level vocabulary, and they just stuck with me. And when I think of Stan Lee as a writer, what I think about is he was definitely not writing down, because I think he probably got tired of that after being 20 years and just kind of toiling away anonymously almost in comics. And he started to write to a higher level for that time period. And when you read those stories, especially the more sophisticated ones, I still get that thrill of just clearly the man had a sheer joy for language and hyperbole and colorful descriptions, and I just ate that up. And I also think of him as like an inspirational figure, in that when I started my business, all the various incarnations of my store, part of that was because I was so inspired by the exuberance and enthusiasm he had for comics. And I wanted to bring that into my business, all the art on the walls and just celebrating this medium, which, for me, he was a big part of getting me jazzed for the medium and all that, on all its possibilities. And I remember as a kid, and I know Shane at the very least, probably all of you can relate to this, the first time I heard his voice was on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Yep.
And also the Incredible Hulk show that was around at the same time. And I like at that point I knew who Stan Lee was, but I never heard his voice before. And I remember even as a kid thinking, this is exactly how I thought he would sound. Just I remember one Hulk episode I was really excited because I was always really taken like the whole concept of Hydra. And there was a Hulk episode where he fought Hydra. I remember Stan describing Hydra, this international terrorist organization trying to take over the world, and this whole, the whole pitch. And I was just so thrilled that, all right, the ringmaster of all this now narrating these cartoons on Saturday morning. And as I got older, I started to appreciate like Stan Lee, the pitch man, and how I think he's a wonderful writer. I don't think he's like the greatest writer in the history of comics. I think he's way up there and has a very important place. But as a marketing person, he's one of the main reasons the American comic book still exists right now, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, on every level, tirelessly from the Silver Age till he passed away. So what is that, 50 years or so? He was constantly in so many different aspects of media encouraging people to participate and join in on this enthusiasm for the comic book. And we can talk about some of the darker aspects of that, the politics, the economics, the fact that, sometimes it was him, sometimes it wasn't even his doing, other people, where people started to assume, this guy created everything, which obviously we all know wasn't true. And all the interviews I've read, I think later in his life, he was trying to, I don't know if atone is the right word, but he was trying to make it more clear that other people were involved in those creations. So that's a whole other topic. I mean, we talked a lot when we did our Kirby spotlights a couple years ago, but that aspect of it, I don't want to say aside because it's very important to the story, but for me, as a lover of the medium, who in many ways dedicated a lot of his adult life to it, and I'm talking about myself here, and also, in many ways bled for it. One of the things that really kept me in the trenches all those years was that I was just – my great love for the medium in large part is because of the world Stan Lee sort of helmed and the excitement and enthusiasm he created for that world, and the fact that I felt like all these characters, I knew them all because while I fully believe that the artists were probably more plotting a lot of these stories than he was, if you read all those comics he wrote when he was writing almost all of them in the Silver Age and then it's a little bit in the early Bronze Age, he created a voice for Marvel that was so singular. The caption boxes, the narrative, that kind of – because Stan Lee was always about jumping into pop culture trends. So sometimes some of the jazzy language and like the references to like things that were going on that were quote unquote hip or were going on in politics and so forth. And there was just something about that world that made it so alive for me. And you knew Peter Parker, you knew Harry Osborn, you wanted to go into their apartment, like you knew that apartment, like you'd been in apartments like that in your life. The battles, like Benjamin J. Grimm was so real, and his relationship with Reed and Sue and Johnny, and just watching the latest season of Daredevil. Kevin, have you watched Daredevil season 3?
Yes, I have.
Okay, I rarely curse in there, but I have to here. It was fucking phenomenal. Yeah. I think it's one of the best shows they've done of any of the Marvel series thus far.
Absolutely.
Forgive my colorful language there, but I had to emphasize.
Sure.
But watching, and the actors are phenomenal, but watching on the screen Matt Murdock, Karen Page, and especially Foggy Nelson, that guy is amazing in that part. Watching the three of them interact, I'm like, there it is, like – they went to the comics. They got it. Like they put that spirit on the screen. And while a lot of that is all from Miller and so forth, but when you go back to the beginning and those three characters and their dynamic, it all started with the stories Lee was co-creating. And with all the characters, I love them all because he and the artist gave them such life in a way that was, again, it seems so hackneyed today, but was unprecedented for that time period. So I was telling my wife, well, I certainly wasn't surprised by his passing because of his age. It still really struck me. I felt like I felt like I'd lost someone I've always known but never have actually really known.
Yeah.
And I did meet him once, like on a convention line, like in the '90s in Pittsburgh, and he was very personable, just very quickly. But we can get into some of the controversies if we want to. But there's, for me, so much of who I am as a reader, as a lover of the medium, and even in some ways just as a person, is because of Stan Lee. So that's my sort of my opening remarks, as lengthy as they were.
Amen to that. I knew him more as a spokesman than anything else, and showing my age here, I'm the first time I ever heard his voice was during the Marvel Action Hour in the 90s. With the Fantastic Four show and Iron Man and stuff like that, when he would start off with this, face front, true believers, and then go ahead and start off the whole animation block there in syndication. And I grew up with Stan Lee Presents on most of my comic books. I read Stan's Soapbox in the 80s and 90s and 2000s and whatnot, and I grew to appreciate just what he stood for. And you're absolutely right, Chris, that the entire industry would not exist without his spokesmanship, without his voice, and without his drive, just pushing things forward. Because I mean, even when he wasn't writing everything, and even when he wasn't creating everything, he was there on the front lines. And it was very much that way until the late 70s. That he was the only one working out of Marvel's offices for a while, because when they had to fire everybody, he was the only one left. And keeping things together, basically, after he lost all of his artists and they were working off of old scripts that were sitting in drawers, he kept it going. And I highly appreciate him for that. I knew he was 95. I mentioned I put out an episode of Comic Timing about a week before this aired, episode 194, where we got together and sort of did our own coda on Stan. And I mentioned that I lost my own grandfather this year at the age of 95, and I thought to myself when it happened, "Oh God, Stan's next." And wow. I didn't know it would happen so close together, because I only lost my grandfather a few months ago. But I knew that in some ways Stan was my comic book grandfather, and I knew it was going to hurt in a similar fashion when he passed. And that's very much the case. And I highly appreciate everything he did for the industry. Even if he didn't do all he said he did at times, he had the bravado to make you believe he did. And I think that says a lot about Stan's character.
Yeah, I came this close to joining you guys for that episode of Comic Timing.
If only you had your mic.
So it was. The kingdom was lost, all for the want of a mic. Yes. The thing of it is, Ian, I was at the Christmas barn, actually. For some reason, my PC there has not yet been affected by the Skype upgrade, which has kept me from using Skype with my personal laptop for over a year now.
Huh.
So I have, at home, I have a mic but no Skype access. At work, I have Skype access but no mic. And it all just kind of added up to my not being a part of that episode with you. Just my comic timing was off.
Well, I'm happy to be with you now. That's what matters.
Yes, and we're very happy to have you, Ian. And
Here.
Can you tell folks where they might find that episode of Comic Timing if they'd like to listen to it?
Yep, comictiming.net. And whatever podcast aggregator you feel like going to, iTunes, Android, some other ones I can't possibly think of at the moment. They're pretty much everywhere.
Indeed. Well, we'd probably be hearing from Kevin right now, but he had to step out for a moment to move his van. One of our neighbors just poked his head in and said, "Can somebody move the white van out there?" So, well, Kevin takes care of that. I'll put in my 2 cents here, because honestly, I don't have that many comments to make on Stan's passing. You guys have already have done a fine job as it is. Kevin being a big-time Marvel maven, I'm sure he'll have some meaty remarks. But yeah, like you, Ian, I've known Stan more as a pitchman than as a writer and creator. I mean, my time in comics pretty much coincides with Stan's reaching the end of his long and fertile creative life of productivity as a comics creator. He continued to write quite a few comics, but they weren't the best things he'd ever done. As a matter of fact, my last episode of The Time Bubble, I spent a long time pretty much laying into Stan for the one installment in his Just Imagine Stan Lee with various artists creating various DC characters. I'm led to understand some of those one-shots were actually kind of good, but the one I read, the Green Lantern one, was not. And so I'm afraid Stan suffers for for the limited sampling of that I got to see. So I'm a little sorry about that, but not too sorry, because as my old grad school mentor Jeremy Wallach used to say, in scholarship and criticism, there is no respect for the dead. And a lousy comic is a lousy comic, even if the man who created it is no longer with us. But let's remember the things that Stan did that were great and that were game-changing and world-changing. But yes, I agree that as a writer, he accomplished some great things for the superhero genre and the comics medium. As Chris intimated in his opening remarks, he gave comic books a whole new vocabulary. I mean, not just literally a higher level of word, but also structural vocabulary, the caption boxes that Chris mentioned, the occasional breaking of the fourth wall, and also like emotional and topical vocabulary. He gave superheroes new ways of thinking and feeling, reacting to their life situation, of interacting with the other people in their lives, including their fellow superheroes. The Fantastic Four's family dynamic springs immediately to mind there. He introduced new real-world situations to which superheroes could respond. He pretty much pioneered the use of tight continuity. You know, as a continuity wonk myself, this is important to me, as a marketing technique. You know, tight continuity not only between issues of one character's title, but between multiple titles. You know, creating just to coin a phrase, a universe, because Stan pretty much did, of characters and titles sharing a single context, a single world, a single history. And he understood that if he could lead people to understand that all of these stories were part of a single world and part of a single constantly unfolding narrative tapestry, he might encourage people to read more comics and make more money for himself and for his company. So yeah, it really contributed to the evolution of comic books as a narrative medium, and also helped to build Marvel Comics into the powerhouse that it ultimately would be. So for those of us who have enjoyed the continuity between superhero comics, Stan was a large part of introducing that to us. And yes, and absolutely his role as a pitchman cannot be overemphasized. He's probably the best marketing and PR guy that comics have ever had, and he's also the best cultural ambassador that they've ever had. I was just talking to my mother tonight before I came over here. I was just citing her as an example of a kind of a cultural outsider to the world of comics, and we were talking about how many people nowadays know more about, how many more people nowadays know who Stan Lee is than they did several years ago, like 20 years ago? How many more people are familiar with the world of superheroes thanks to, characters that Stan Lee co-created and have since been promoted to other media in the past couple of decades? He's the old guy with the glasses who made the cameos in all these Marvel movies that kids are watching these days. So he'll be remembered by the younger generation for that. But we geek insiders, I think we feel a more profound sense of indebtedness to him. The various caveats that we've made and that we continue to make about how much did he actually create in the comics world, and how many of the things that went right in his career were at the expense of other creators. And I would like to think that, as Chris said, that he did spend some time in his own way atoning for that by mitigating this public misconception that he single-handedly created the entire Marvel Universe. But putting all of that aside, there's no denying that he did contribute significantly both to Marvel Comics and to comics in general. He helped to reinvent the superhero genre for a new era in the 60s and continued to make significant contributions for decades after that. And we should all, as Chris said, he was 95 years old. His death doesn't really come as a great shock. It was going to happen sooner or later, but we just should be glad that he had such a long, productive, successful life. And also be glad, just on a slightly more sour note, that he's now free of those forces that were trying to manipulate and exploit him. The whole elder abuse scandal that was surrounding him. So he is beyond where such parasites can touch him any longer. And let's all just be glad that we had him for as long as we did, that he was vital for as long as he was, kept on doing those con appearances right up to the end. And Excelsior.
And Mert, I wanted to piggyback for a moment, just something you said, because in my classroom, I teach, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and I have a whiteboard in the back, and I walk in, I think it was the next day, and on the whiteboard was written, R.I.P. Stan Lee, by one of the kids. And I can assure you, very few teenagers today are reading comics.
More's the pity.
But a lot of them knew who he was, and they were like, Mr. Everly, because I have like an army of bobbleheads on my desk. It's like part of my signature style in the classroom. And a lot of them are comic book characters and other pop culture figures. Shane, you love my Cylon, it speaks. But anyway, so a lot of kids like, oh, I heard Stan Lee died, and like they all knew him from the movies, like you said, like, and they were saying, oh, I bet he'll still be in Captain Marvel and the Avengers one, and like a lot of kids. To back up your point, Murd, like, yes, they like. It's amazing when you think about how many acts he's had in his life when it comes to his professional life. You know, he starts off, as Ian was mentioning, sort of like this anonymous. You know, first he's the gopher for Lee and Kirby, then he becomes the editor at like. I think he was 19 or something like that. Then he joins the army. Then he comes back after the war. He served stateside, and then he's for like 20 years he's the editor in chief of Timely/Atlas. And if his life had ended then, he'd be a footnote really in comic book history. But then he has that next act with the Silver Age, and then he's the pitch man. Then he's trying to get Marvel going in Hollywood, which I know he had a lot of struggles with. And then he's like, the goodwill ambassador. I mean, it's an extraordinary arc when you look at it. Shane, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, brother.
No, that's okay. I wanted to chime in before Kevin because I want to sit back and enjoy what Kevin has to say about him.
Such expectations.
I came across Stan Lee a little bit like Chris did in the cartoons back in the 80s with the Spider-Man and his Amazing Friends and the Hulk. And from there, he was always the voice that I could go to or think about as the one guy that, no matter what, promoted the love of the medium in every way, shape, and form, in TV shows, in movies, in comics, any interview I ever saw, any appearance I ever heard of at a convention. It was always what a great life he had, how much he loved talking to fans, listening to questions they had, promoting anything that he did that would help advance the medium to reach as many people as possible and in some fashion. Any idea he came up with, his input, like Ian said, seeing Stan Lee Presents on the top of every book, to me he was everywhere. And he was the backbone of Marvel Comics. There's 1,000 other people that had help and influence all the whole way there. But when I think Marvel Comics, I first think Stan Lee and look at what he created with everybody else involved helping him. And like Chris said, I thought he'd be around forever. It's just one of those things that my entire life, there's always been Stan Lee. I mean, he's accomplished more by the time he was what my age is now, and yet he still had a whole nother 44 years till he reached 95. And man, I can only hope to reach a fraction of that and do anything remotely close to what he did. It's just an astounding thing. I loved when he started being cameoed in movies. I first remember him in Mallrats. And from there it skyrocketed, and then to see him start getting in the Marvel cameos just blew me away. I love when I come across those videos of somebody splicing together every cameo he's ever had, from the cartoon announcements through the movies, and he was a character on that Marvel Superheroes cartoon, like a kiddie version of it a few years ago, wasn't he? He was the mayor or something.
I believe so, yeah.
And he voiced that for episode after episode.
Oh, wow.
There was just no end to his love and enjoyment of this medium and everything that surrounded it, and I always appreciated that. I loved when we got to talk to him on the show for a few minutes that one time.
Oh my God.
That's episode 83 for those who were wondering.
That's the closest I ever came to actually meeting him. I've seen him at conventions, of course, but that was the closest to actually with being able to talk to him, even though it was just for a few minutes. It was still a high point in something I've been able to do while being on this show. Sorely missed. I can't believe after a while there will be no more cameos, but even the Netflix TV series, throw him in somewhere, a picture, a reference, something is in there if you pay attention during the show at some point. Love that he even got on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for that one episode. It just warms my heart anytime I could see him, listen to him. Just something that will be terribly missed here going forward. But glad I was alive for as long as I have been with him as a figurehead for this medium.
And Shane, one of the cameos that I'm glad happened that I'd actually forgotten about until I watched one of those compilation videos was in X-Men Apocalypse. It's both him and Joan.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and that was that shortly before she died, if I remember correctly. And that was, one of the few times we got to see the two of them together on screen, and it was sort of magical. And the closest I ever came to him to meeting him was sitting behind him at Baltimore Comic-Con in 2012.
I saw that picture you posted.
Yeah, me too.
It was the Harvey Awards, and he was presenting a Lifetime Achievement Award to John Romita Jr., which I still find fascinating that they presented a Lifetime Achievement Award to John Romita Jr. when he still has much of a lifetime to go. Here's hoping. But him and John Romita Sr. came up and presented him with the award, and after the Harveys had begun, they sat down Stan with a girl next to him, like usual, directly in front of me after the Harveys began, and I'm just like I'm nudging the person next to me. I'm like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. and I grabbed a few candids and basically just basked in the glow of the man while he was standing down there. And I think that was the same Baltimore Comic-Con that Pants was in the elevator with Stan.
Okay. All right.
If memory serves, because I remember that story also was at a Baltimore Comic-Con.
I'm sure Stan never forgot that either.
I'm sure.
I mean, it's something to be said, and it's neat to hear everybody's perspective and their experience, and that's what it really comes down to. It's not just about reading comics; it's an experience, and that's what Stan. When you're kids, obviously you're reading books, you're enjoying what's there. You're seeing what's on the page, but then as you get older and you start paying attention to more, and that was my experience with it. Is that I saw Stan's name in the book all the time, and I was aware of it, recognized it, obviously, but it's just I didn't pay much mind to it. But then you see Stan's soapbox, and you see it in the bulletins, and you see, it was just like his name was everywhere, and he was inputting on every page, whether it was, the bulletin or the beginning, the intro, or whatever, and then when it became more of an entity as a business. And that was something that he created as well, because he wanted it to make an experience for the fans. He wanted them to feel like they were part of, the universe, part of the industry, part of the company. That's why he created the Marvel Marching Society and things like that. He wanted the fans to be, feel like they were part of it. And he certainly accomplished that. I mean, grounding the universe in reality, putting it in New York and things like that, things that he did, in essence, I could see, to simplify it, to make it easier to, to reference off of things, but then, it grounds it in reality, and it's like, what, I didn't even think of that until, I realized that, when it was brought to my attention, I was like, wow, you just kind of took it for granted. It was part of the thing. And then, as I got even older, then I started looking to seeing like how many facets he was handling in Marvel Comics for probably 10 years. I mean, between scripting, how many books per month, co-plotting, editor-in-chief, publisher, promoter, every month. I mean, for at least a decade, before he started handing and delegating the reins to like Roy Thomas to be editor-in-chief and things like that. I mean, so that's what I look at as like, look what all he did when you put all that together, as for 10 years, at least he did all that in an essence to himself, and then co-collaborated with all these great creators that we've come to know and love. And so I hear the things about the whole, who created who and da-da-da-da-da, and I'm just kind of like, what? Stan never once in any interview or anything I ever saw ever claimed to, created everything, and did it all himself. He never just, that was something he never did. That was something that the public, kind of, assumed or presumed, and then it became, whatever you want to call controversy or whatever. But, I look at it as, again, to be able to script how many books per month for how many years. I mean, that in itself is an accomplishment. The same reason when I grew up, I didn't really care for Jack Kirby's art. It was just an art style that didn't really speak to me. But then when I used to read interviews, and like I read an interview about John Romita Sr., and he said about how, Stan brought him in to draw superheroes, and it's something he wasn't really that familiar with, and so he gave the script to Jack, and Jack came back the next morning with like almost a whole book like laid out and and roughed in, and I'm thinking to myself, that made me appreciate Jack more than anything, that he could do that much work and that fluently and that creatively, that quickly, and so it gave me a reverence for him that I didn't appreciate and then I slowly started integrating into his art style and stuff. But that's what I learned with Stan, in the essence that, however much input he did with co-plotting the stories, but scripting everything and listening to you guys talk about the vocabulary and the things like that, that's all him. That's all. And then and that energy and enthusiasm from the first book I read until the day he died had never changed. I mean, anytime you ever saw him, anytime you ever heard him, anytime you ever read him on a page, that enthusiasm and energy was there. Yeah. I mean, so that is an accomplishment in and of itself, regardless of the controversy. And that body of work and that much effort that he put forth, you have to appreciate it. You just have to, and I like with Chris, said too about like the origins, and stuff like that. Those books were integral for me as a kid, because it gave you access to books. We didn't have comic shops, so there was
no internet.
Yeah, you were reserved to whatever you found on the newsstand, and but I could pick up that Origins or of Marvel Comics or the Son of Origins and stuff like that, and you could read all these different characters in one trade paperback, and obviously you can look back and say, yes, that was like a marketing tool, to make money and stuff, but look how accessible he made the universe and how how you were able as a fan to be part of that cohesive universe, like you said, like he wanted, he integrated that continuity to have characters cross over from one book to the next, so that way you might read an issue in X-Men because Spider-Man was in it or something like, what I mean? It's like there's so much that he contributed to the industry in and of itself. It's understated, and I think he's deserved of any accolades that, or however you want to choose to perceive him and speak of him. But I mean, I couldn't imagine Marvel, yet alone comics, without his contribution. Lord only knows. But you start really thinking about it. What would it be at this point? I mean, he completely turned the whole industry on in a 180 in the early '60s with the Silver Age. I mean, you just didn't read books like that. And I like that he didn't, write down. I like that he was writing at a collegiate level, and I'm the same too. I mean, there's so much vocabulary I learned from reading comics is just because, I come across a word and be like, I don't know what the hell that is, but I want to know what it is now because it's integral to the story or it's important to the character, and I want to know what that means. So it sticks with you because you have an enthusiasm because of it's a comic, but yet it makes you want to learn that word. And there's just so much that I certainly do appreciate him for, and I that's why I also, as a person, like I said, I didn't see any difference from the day he died from the from the day he started the Silver Age of comics. I don't see any change in enthusiasm, behavior, nothing. And I did get to meet him back in '93, and I went to he was at the Comic Fest in Philly, the only year they had that show, and he did a panel. And I made sure I was there. I wanted to, I wanted to hear that panel. I wanted to hear him talk. I wanted to be, whatever I could absorb, I wanted to absorb. Behind the scenes stuff, whatever. And it was a joyous trip for an hour. And then, he left, and it was one of those moments like, God, go up. And then I was like, nah. And I ended up walking out in the hallway. And he was being escorted by, his assistant to another area. And there was hardly anybody in the hallway. So I was like, what the hell? I'm going to go up and say hi. And as soon as I started to approach, she was like, the furrowed brow and like, get away, And he saw me and I was like, I just want, and he was like, come here, and it was there, man. It was like, and I know the whole time, this is happening. I look out the corner of my eye and she looks furious as all hell, and he is he is engaging me as if I was, another creator or another person of the show, and gave me a few minutes, and I'll never forget that. And because how it happened made it even that much more special, because he easily could have just put the blinders up and let the assistant guide him and just not even say anything, not even acknowledge your year, but like I said, even say a hi or a wave. But no, he made it a point to stop and talk to me, and I was like, what a cool guy, I still say I think the reason why he was 95 is because of that energy and enthusiasm he had.
Yeah,
it just
it's practically the power cosmic.
Yeah, pretty much. Great analogy. You're absolutely right. I totally feel that way myself. It's just I truly believe that he had such a positive energy and such a positive outlook and an enthusiasm that was just phenomenal. I mean, I can only imagine the energy level, and I do. When you read all the stories of all the back, and the other thing is with the creators that he did too is you always had creators listed in the book, which they get their credit. I always acknowledged. I always fell into comics first because of art, so I always used to pay attention to all the artist names, because I started to be able to associate.
Sure.
The art style with an artist, so I could pick out the art and I didn't have to have the name, there, and that's how it started. But then, I'm reading the books, and Stan puts his twist on that. It's like, Jazzy John Romita and Rascally Roy Thomas, and I'm like, he gave them, like another level of impersonation, that just made them exciting too, and you didn't get that in any other books and stuff like that. So there's just so many little things that just added up to a whole lot of fun, and I am ever so grateful for his whole contribution to comics in general, but to my life, he certainly was a great contribution. Comics were my escape, and again, I wouldn't know what I'd do if they weren't there.
Yeah.
But so, that's my take on it.
I loved seeing the post with Roy Thomas, like 2 or 3 days before he passed away, that he got to hang out with him and talk to him for the day and got a couple pictures. That was really something cool.
Stan the Man and Roy the Boy.
Yeah.
I think of it in the essence, I go like, with things I've done myself, and when you create something, it's so personal. Mm-hmm. It's such a part of you. There's a part of you that's in that. And I look what all he contributed to, and then I'm thinking, what a decision, and how hard that was for him to pass the reins of editor-in-chief over to Roy Thomas. Yeah. I'm like, okay, you guys start handling the books. You guys start picking the direction of where things go. I'm like, wow. After like I said, 10, 12 years of him doing, predominantly everything, in an essence, and please don't jump on my ass. I know he didn't do everything, but I mean, he did so much for that publishing company.
Yeah, he did a hell of a lot of scripting. That's for sure.
I just imagine scripting 10, 12 books a month for how many years? You know what I mean? And again, again, creating characters. I mean, that he created, that part of the character, however much he plotted in that book, he created that character. Each character was unique. They spoke differently. Everything was unique about these characters, and to be able to do that for how many books a month? I mean, you're writing Avengers, X-Men. Each one of those has how many characters in it. Then you have your singular books, and you can't say that without his influence that Spider-Man would be the character who he is nowadays, and even if he would be around anymore, he just gave him such a. There's so much uniqueness and reality that he grounded his characters into that really made you feel a part of. Yeah. And then he created this whole company that made you feel a part of as well. It's a unique experience. I don't know if we'll ever, have anything else to compare it like that, in that vastness of
originality.
Inclusion. Originality, creativity, and exclusivity in a way.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing. Chances are people outside of the New York legislature would not know the word Excelsior.
Exactly.
Because that's the motto of New York. It's right there on the frickin' flag.
Sweet.
And Stan, took that and turned it into his exclamation because he found it, a fascinating statement, and it was a sign of quality. And that's exactly what he did with that. And I very much thank him for that because I freaking love the word. And the other thing I'll bring up is episode 367, people. If you have not listened to the CGS debate, Stan Lee versus Jack Kirby.
That's a great one.
Do yourself a favor, and when you're done listening to this episode, go back into the archives and listen to that one because it's one hell of a good time and goes very much further into the back and forth of basically not exactly who did what, but necessarily whose side are you on or whatever or anything like that. Just more there's a middle ground, and you have to reach that, especially with Jack and Stan.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have an appreciation for all of them. I mean, and they each had, phenomenal contributions to whatever they were working on. So you just accept that. That's, what I mean? You just accept that. They all worked together. They worked as a team. Stan was the leader. He was guiding the ship. He was, even guiding the collaborations. I mean, he was plotting. He was co-plotting all those. I mean, you heard the stories about when the artist would go in and he'd be jumping up on his desk and let's have Thor do this issue and da-da-da-da-da, and then they would go home and do their work and then hand it in and then he would review it and script it, you know what I mean, and edit it and do all his work that he did, outside of just the stories alone. So, you're not going to sit there and start dissecting everything because what are you going to gain? And I think you're better off as a fan. You just sit back and go, you know what? Everybody had a great contribution. You appreciate everybody for what they did. Yep. And thank you so much for doing it, So
what I wanted to piggyback on what you guys were saying, and Kevin, you made a great point about when you look at the overall expanse of his career and the contributions he made, what's often overlooked under like the hyperbole of the pitchman and so forth is what a tremendous editor and art director he was. So for much of his career, like before he became like the persona of Stan Lee, he was selecting and encouraging and nurturing some of the greatest artists who ever put, ink to page when it comes to the comic book medium in the United States. I mean, when Marvel started to gain traction in the 60s, he called John Romita Sr. because he remembered him from the 50s. He called John Buscema. He called Gene Colan. He encouraged all these guys to come in, and he was thrilled, of course, when Kirby returned and so forth. So, he in addition to being that great pitchman and an excellent scripter, he also had this sense of like, who are the best people to help me realize these stories and this energy. And you guys talked about how Kirby was the guy who would often say, all right, Jack, I need you to explain to John what kind of dynamics are on with this character, or explain to Don Heck and so forth. And I'm very gratified to see the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby on the books now because, and I agree with Ian, there's so much that middle ground. I don't think either man could have done what they did without the other.
Absolutely.
We've talked about that many times over the years. And it's that's the sort of the nexus of everything for me. And in addition to that, Kevin made some great points also about the continuity, as did Murd. Think about how when you read the older Marvel comics, there's always those editorial boxes where they say, check out issue so-and-so, or don't you remember when this happened? But it's not like a dry, flat, like, so an issue is such and such. It's the editor's talking to you, the reader, saying, hey, don't you remember that? Or you should go check that story out. And that got you excited because you're like, oh, wow, this really matters. Like today with comics, even though I still love them and read them, they don't matter much to me anymore. Like I just read Green Lantern 1. We'll talk about it in a moment. It didn't matter much to me. All right? Those books, though, that I was reading when I read the reprints in the 60s and the 70s, and then I'm reading books in the 80s, it felt like it still really mattered because the universe was so tight. And that's because of him and Thomas and the people who followed him establishing that continuity. And that's why I think today the movies are so exciting because they're kind of creating that continuity again in the films and with the TV shows. And I think so many people who don't read the comics at all are getting excited by the continuity in the television and film. And that all goes back to what Lee and the artists started. And that's why I think these films are so strong. And that's why I think that they're overall more satisfying thus far than a lot of the DC films because they really taken pains to imbue it with that essence of what makes Marvel so special. And I'm so glad Kevin mentioned the Mary Marvel Marching Society. If you've never looked up online the lyrics to the record. That like he wrote like this goofy song and he had all the artists come in and like perform it, and then like people get like a button and a patch or stickers or whatever, and like they sent in $1 to get it all, and that was in the '60s, and nobody was doing stuff like that. Or think about the letters pages, right? Mm-hmm. Now I know EC had really started with the idea of like the more personalized letters page, but then when you look at the letters page from the Silver Age, it's not like Dear Editor, it's Hey Stan and Jack or Dear Stan and Steve, and whether it was him or Flo Steinberg, whoever wrote them back, but everything was personal. And if I can kind of bring Marvel down to its essence for me, it was personal. Like you felt you had a personal stake in these characters and what they were going through, and also how he really emphasized the soap operatic elements. There were some issues I cared more about whether or not Peter got on a date, whether or not he was going to fight the Vulture. Like sometimes that was more exciting. And think about what an achievement even that was. Like you cared about supporting characters. Like who gives a crap about Snapper Carr, right? Like back then. But I cared about Robbie Robertson. I cared about his relationship with his son. I cared about Mary Jane and Gwen and
Aunt May.
Willie Lumpkin and like Aunt May and Foggy and all these great characters. And he made supporting characters really matter. Like they were really intrinsic to the stories, and that they just fleshed out the lead characters so much, his interactions. And one last thing I would say for kind of my rant is when I think about Stanley's scripted stories I really love, and I think where he's at the top of his game. Read Amazing Spider-Man, like mid to late 60s. Like the Clay Tablet saga, all those stories, the drug issues with the Green Goblin. I think that's some of the best writing of his career, basically. I don't know. I'd like to know what Kevin thinks of that. But to me, those are some of the most exciting Spider-Man stories ever written, because he's so clicking at that point, like with the supporting cast, the villains, just the whole feel of that world of Spider-Man. And to me, that's as much as the Ditko stuff is important. To me, that stuff is just as important. It's got John Romita Sr., Jim Mooney, John Buscema all penciling those issues. Later, Gil Kane. I mean, he was in his prime. Like Murd's right. Like obviously, when he's a later man, like no one's going to remember Ravage, 2099 or anything like that. But in his prime, like he was writing fun, exciting, personal stories that had life to them. Like it wasn't like, oh, there's the I love DC, but like there's the Flash. His head's getting big because he drank this potion or something. Like that's all that fun, silly stuff. But these characters, they were tangible, and that's what he and the artists did that I think was ultimately just so important.
I agree, Chris. I mean, it was for me, when seeing him script all these books, but for some reason, Spider-Man always stood out. There's something about that book that was like the anchor of the universe, and it seemed, I don't want to speculate or presume anything, but I mean, what he created in that book, and like you said, even at the end of his run as writer, I mean, there's so many milestones in that series, character-wise, story-wise, everything. I mean, it was just on fire. It was clicking on every angle, and it was such a great book. It was just fun to read, and I look at the Fantastic Four and I think, well, here's that formula. You have a group of superheroes together, but there's such a dynamic with their personalities, the family dynamic and the Ben and Johnny thing, and I mean, there was so much going on there. It was not your average team book. There was something so unique and so different about it, and the thing about the whole crossovers is, that I always looked at it as each book that I read as an individual character, I cared about that character. It was interesting to me. So when they did meet or cross over or whatever you want to, it was special. It was, for something like that to happen, it was extremely special. It was neat to see these characters kind of have that uniqueness of personality and such, being able to, come into a story and you're anxious to see how they interact together. What do they do? I often use it as an example in the essence of how, like the Daredevil Punisher, thing that became very popular to play off of. You wouldn't have had that if you didn't have all that other stuff prior to that. With Stan crossing over the other characters. I mean, some of my favorite books. I mean, I think my first book that I can consciously remember, reading and looking at was Marvel Team Up #3, and it's like you had Marvel 2 in 1, you had Marvel Team Up. You know what I mean? Those books were completely focused on having interaction with other characters. And sometimes they were very congruent, and it was a cool story, and sometimes they disagreed, and so you didn't have stuff like that all the time. So I could read a Spider-Man book, but I also was anxious to read a Marvel team-up because, he's with Doctor Strange this time, or he's with the Human Torch, or, And he created that dynamic between the Human Torch and Spider-Man, which obviously, even through Dan Slott's run is something that, people have, capitalized on, So all those things were it's just so unique, And I did read DC books, but, I mean, it just was not as interesting to me as Marvel. They were interesting characters. I liked some of the things they were doing. I mean, you talk about the drug issues with Harry, which I thought were, cool, and even more so now that you find out that, he had to fight and actually, took the balls to publish it without the Comics Code Authority. And, all those things now you find out about in the after scenes, not when those books were being put out, but years later. It's, and I used to get the calendars. Like as a kid, the licensing in itself was something that was, it was an experience in itself too. I mean, I used to, go to the mall or whatever, and I'd be looking for Spider-Man stuff or, comic stuff, and you would come across the calendars. I used to look forward to the calendar every year because all the cool shit, it was like, all this great original artwork, but then each month, as the days are, he put birthdays of creators and milestones of characters and, whatever. And so there's almost in every day there's something fun, and like you said about the scripting, I think that's where I really remembered and it came to my attention that how much he was scripting when, it was like somebody drew him like face planting into his typewriter and there was a word balloon. It's like, 100 issues of Spider-Man done, and I'm thinking, yeah, but he's writing Fantastic Four, and he's writing this, and he's writing that, and I'm like, wow, that's what I think. Things like that made me bring it to my awareness and make me pay attention to stuff like that, and so those calendars were a highlight every year, and then like you said, the Fireside books and all that other stuff. I mean, as a kid growing up, I mean, shit, the Amigos. I mean, there's so much stuff out there. It's like.
You said a magic word.
Yeah, I mean, the cartoons, and again, how you read now behind the scenes articles and, read them 20 years ago and stuff like that, how all those things came to fruition and he was involved in all that stuff too. It's like, it's amazing.
Well, one thing I would also say is that, because you were talking about Spider-Man, the voice and the scripting, think about the voice of Spider-Man and the wisecracking. Mm-hmm. And that was all Lee, and I think that's one of the things that so sells that character and still makes that character so vital and interesting and fun. Like you root for that character. Spider-Man's one of the great underdogs in comics. And we've talked many times about the Marvel method. Because as you said, he was scripting so many books, so he really relied heavily on these master artists to do a lot of the plotting. Which then you get into the whole, the co-creator issues. And then he would come back and fill in the capture the word balloons. But we shouldn't undersell that part of it because he gave those characters such distinct voices. And that's what you're reading. Again, it's unfortunate people at the time didn't realize that how much the artist really putting into all of that
right.
In terms of the plots. But the voices of like the voice of Spider-Man, which when I think of Stan Lee scripting, I think of Spider-Man first and foremost. What a wonderful creation, and just to separate that character from, and I think that's why one of the reasons why Spider-Man is so seen as one of these great all-time supers is because of the voice that the character has.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think of him like ridiculing his opponents, I mean, so many heroes do that now in some form or another throughout stories throughout the years. But I mean, Spider-Man. I mean, because oftentimes when you read, they're still funny. Like some of the cracks he makes, it still works, and you can just see how much he was enjoying.
And it didn't seem forced. It didn't feel.
Yeah.
It didn't feel forced. It wasn't like he was doing it to be a comedian. You know what I mean? It was just a facet that he added to that character that again made him unique compared to all the other characters, and it was something that I even say to this day is lacking in the movies and other iterations. That I was so used to reading that in the books and the '60s cartoon and stuff like that. I mean, that stuff was there. I mean, especially the cartoon. I mean, that those quips and stuff. And again, he could be very serious, and he could go into and later on they explained it as the whole, like his way of coping with the fear of being a teenage superhero and stuff. Which fine, cool, but that was such an integral facet that again, it never felt forced, it never felt coerced, it never felt heavy-handed. It was just something that was there, and it added to the character, and it was, he did that, so.
And he also, was one of the first creators to really start introducing characters of diversity that weren't just stereotypes. I mean, Robbie Robertson was a great example.
Good point. Yep.
Absolutely.
He was a character that was there as support, and he was one of the more mature characters in the title, and he would always be the one who would rein in J. Jonah.
Right.
So he was definitely there for that. He helped in the creation of Black Panther as well, and a character that basically has spitballed into being one of the most important characters in the Marvel universe, and again was not a stereotype. I mean, sure, there might have been some moments that were a little bit silly at times, but but he avoided like the Sambo type stuff that might have been happening in other comic books before then, and I appreciate him for that.
Yeah, well said, sir.
I do like that you brought up, Chris, about him as far as being like, again behind the scenes, being the art director and things like that. When you read a lot of these backstories of a lot of the creators that came in and were these co-creators of these characters and of the Marvel Universe, and how he, could foresee, who could help him, achieve what he was setting out to do, and put style to form, as well as, who he thought would be best to be on the book, yet alone who could do it, who could handle the chores, So he did have that insight to be able to do that. And then, obviously, facilitate it because, like I said, with Romita Sr., I mean, he was, from many interviews I read, he was very unsure of himself.
Yep.
And he, with the genre himself, he was like, I can't, and
he struggled with the Marvel method, too.
Absolutely. And, but Stan never, Stan always encouraged him and always, nudged him, and look how integral John Romita Sr. became to the Marvel Universe. I mean, so like, I'm glad you brought that up because that's something that is, again, to be acknowledged. It's all those other things, outside of the scripting and whatnot that I appreciate him for, if not more so than the in-your-face things. But
bravo. Any other comments, gentlemen, on Mr. Lee?
That's it.
I believe the service has concluded.
We nailed it.
So there we are. Requiescat in pace, Mr. Marvel.
I love it.
Ending it with random Latin just to stand off and ended his soapbox.
Absolutely. Perfect. Love it.
Enough said.
Love it.
Perfect.
Perfect. Kevin, while I got you here, I just wanted to, without spoiling for everybody else, because they probably haven't seen it.
Sure.
Ian, have you seen Daredevil Season 3?
Haven't gotten to it yet, no.
Okay, so just Kevin, just keeping it general, how do you feel about that season?
It was phenomenal. I liked it better than the second season. I found it a viewing experience similar to the first season, where, like each episode. Like the first, I remember watching the first season, and it was like I watched the first 3 episodes, and I loved it. I was so excited to see this iteration of one of my favorite characters, and I remember after watching like that 3rd episode, with what was it called, the Rabbit in a Snowstorm or whatever, with the Kingpin and that painting, and they brought in Vanessa, and as soon as that hit, I remember that energy, and I was like, I'm in, and it took off from there. And this season was basically that type of experience. You had your first setup for the first, 2-3 episodes, and they were interesting in itself. and then it just goes, man. It just goes, and I applaud him for what some of it was a little heavy-handed, but every character was pertinent, and they made sure that there was focus on every character, so everybody had their moment in the sun, and it was more than once, so Foggy was in it a lot, and Karen and obviously Matt and his mother, Maggie and the Kingpin, and it was just everybody mattered and everybody was face front. There was nobody felt like ancillary or just thrown in. There was a consistent focus on all characters at all times. So we talk about that, with Stan when you said about with those relationships of the supporting characters being just as integral as the superhero himself, and this season exemplifies that as far as I'm concerned. And I
couldn't agree. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, and one thing that I think that this show has accomplished is brought across the feeling of how menacing Wilson Fisk is as a Kingpin. I mean, it's just as many comics as I've read the Kingpin in. It's like, he's he is who he is, and obviously he's a phenomenal adversary, and he's a foe to be reckoned with. But man, when I'm watching these Netflix shows, I mean, he is. I am like one of those things, like when you're in the room with him, like a character's in the room with him, facing off against him. I am like scared shitless. I'm going like, what? I'd be scared shitless being in that room with that character because.
Well, without spoiling it for the other fellows.
Right.
So
I caught myself there. I almost gave away something.
The episode where he is talking to Karen Page.
Oh, okay, that's what I was going to mention. I didn't know.
Yeah, and that's all I'll say there. But my wife had me in the room watching it with me, and she's like, he's terrifying.
Yeah.
And Vincent D'Onofrio, his performance, I mean, as amazing as it was in the first two seasons, I mean, his diction, the way he enunciates words, the way he carries himself. He, like you said, when he is in the room, you're like, oh shit, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Like, what's he going to do manipulatively? What's he going to do physically? It is, out of all the villains they've portrayed throughout all these films and television, he, to me, is the most frightening villain because he's just a man. Like, he doesn't have like he's physically strong, but he has no superpowers.
Right.
But you just feel like, would you agree, Kevin, that it basically took the spirit of Born Again, they applied it to the show's continuity, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, you could obviously see that it was a foundational, part of the story. It wasn't. I like the fact that it wasn't a regurgitation of the story.
No, and it shouldn't have been. I agree.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even Guardian Devil, there's the underpinnings of that as well. And this, and and I thought they handled it very well. And I thought it exemplified the story. And I think in this season, D'Onofrio's Fisk is the most menacing. Out of all of his, I mean, that's like you said. I mean, he's in a room, and it's like he's not screaming and shouting and yelling, But I'm just like terrified, just being, like if I was in the room with him right now, I'd be like really shitting myself right now.
Because to me, Born Again is the ultimate Kingpin story when they just the sheer menace of that character.
Yeah,
and they just took that and they put it into this show.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's a great actor. I mean, just go all the way back to Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah, his performance is phenomenal. I think, like you said, for him to be able to, his facial expressions and no matter what's going on is like he never, you can never anticipate, what he's going to do or what he's going. I mean, he's that cold and calculated and menacing, and that's the word that had stuck with me throughout the season was menacing. I mean, that character is menacing, and I'm like, wow, you added a layer and level to that character that I have not experienced prior, so.
Well, our comrades, when you watch, I look forward to your reactions. We can talk in more detail.
Cool.
It's definitely going to wind up being watched soon. I know that right now I just started watching Sabrina on Netflix.
I want to watch
that's
that
really
too.
good, man.
I want to watch that.
That's really good. I wasn't going to watch it, and then I was like, maybe I'll try it. And I think, what have I got to lose? And I watched it, and I ended up binge watching it in like 2.5 days. I was just like, this is really good. And I was like, so I give it thumbs up, man.
Definitely, same here. Yeah, I'm 3 episodes in, and it has a personality to it that I really appreciate. It's definitely different than Riverdale.
It's a tone, there's a tone to it. There's so many things, and it's consistent throughout the whole run.
Wow. Yeah, and Shipka, I believe her first name is Kieran Shipka, who I loved in Mad Men as Don Draper's daughter.
Oh yeah, excellent actor. Yeah,
yes,
excellent actor.
Completely encapsulates what I love about Sabrina as a character, and does a really good job. And her aunt's in this as well. I forget who's playing the other one, but one of them's played by the same one who played Etta Candy in the Wonder Woman movie.
Ooh.
And she does a very good job in this.
Yeah, I don't remember their names, but I recognize both of them, and they both did a very good job.
Yeah,
all the characters are good. I think all the characters are good in that too. They're consistent.
Definitely.
Well.
Lucy Davis is Hilda, and I'll see if I can find the name of Zelda off the top of my head. But the other one, I checked out the first couple episodes of She-Ra.
How was that?
I saw that was coming back.
It is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has a spirit to it, I'd say, similar to stuff like Avatar: The Last Airbender and what DuckTales has been doing in the revival.
So good.
A lot more modern personality to it. But at the same time, the character designs are fresh and interesting for me. It's not just cookie cutter, like we're going to make these for toys, like the original was. And they're really like expanding the world and and exactly what's going on in the whole reality. Like she was raised to believe that the world was one way, and then finds out that it's a completely different thing than what she actually realized. So it's very.
I like stories like that.
Yeah, definitely. 3 episodes.
Does He-Man appear?
Not from what I know. No.
Okay.
And I don't even know if they're going to bring him up in season 2. But it has been renewed for a second season. That much I know.
Yep. I have been hearing lots of good things about that. But of course, because it's streaming, I'm not going to get a chance to see it anytime soon. But
yeah.
I understand that. Well, it's She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, right? So that means that the supporting cast is given a little more play this time around than in the 80s series.
Very much so. Yes. Yeah. In fact, the supporting cast is, I feel, almost as important as She-Ra herself.
Oh, wow.
in this rendition. Because basically they find her after she's fallen off of this like bike speeder that she'd been using, and basically take She-Ra in, take Adora in, and then from there, Bo is easily my favorite character on the entire show. And as well as a bunch of the others in the actual community are given a lot more screen time than they were ever given in the original. Catra, too, has real personality that I'm appreciating. So,
right, from the one trailer I saw, so that She-Ra and Adora and Catra were close friends and rising up through the ranks of the Horde together, and then fate takes a hand and they find themselves opposed to one another. Yeah, that is a classic twist.
I'd say it's similar in personality to the remake of Thundercats that they made a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And that one I really enjoyed, and this one too just feels like they're fleshing out the story a lot and giving it a little bit more than just again a toy line, which the original basically was.
True enough. Yeah, though I will say the character designs, while fresh, as you say, Ian, they're a little bit off-putting to me. I'm glad that She-Ra is not quite as hypersexualized as she was in the 80s, but it's still a little weird to me to see She-Ra and her friends portrayed as like 14-year-olds. And the costume is fine with me. The one thing I wish they'd kept from the 80s version was the headdress. They should have gone bigger. Should have looked more like wings that are creeping down the sides of her face, as opposed to like bunny ears or like a tuning fork, which is kind of what the current design looks like to me. And darn it, I wish Bo still had his mustache.
One thing that I will say though, Mert, is that the character designs definitely work a lot better in animation than they do in stills. Because I was a little trepidatious about it too when I first saw the designs, but in the actual flow of the show, they have a lot more life to them than they do in stills.
Well, one day I hope to see exactly what you mean by that, Ian.
Yep.
In the last week, I said to Kevin before the show started, I binged the first season of Star Trek Discovery.
Oh.
That was really good. I was impressed. I love the design. I love the way the story went. There are a couple things that surprised the hell out of me. And even very simply, the title sequence is fantastically retro Star Trek looking. The design of everything is, I don't know if Art Deco is the right word, but it was really interesting to me the way they designed just the title sequence, the way they took the devices and certain things and blew them apart and twisted them around to show you what they were. But yeah, the whole story, it really takes you on a great ride.
Now, Shane, do you have to go to the CBS Access to binge that?
So you do if you sign up. I kind of refuse to pay for that because it's just one show that I'd watch. I know I have friends that have a lot of stuff they watch on that. I would not. I only would want to watch the Star Trek. So I bought it off iTunes when it came out, and that's how I watched it. And part of that's because if the Blu-rays or the DVDs would have come with a digital code, I would have gotten them. But I wanted it to be portable. I wanted to be able to watch an episode at work on a break or at home or in bed or on the computer, on the TV, whatever. So, yeah, I got through it in a week, all 15 episodes.
On the shitter.
Yeah. But what a fantastic ride that it was.
That's cool. That's good to hear that, because that's
Yeah, I
something
wanna watch that.
I'd like to check it out. But, now hearing you talk about it and then it makes it, makes me a little more enthused.
There's a whole aspect of Star Trek. And I mean, I'm sure there's lots of people. I'm not a minority in liking both Star Wars and Star Trek, but there's also a lot of people that you either like one or the other. There's no crossing over. Well, I like all of it.
See, that's like when you were talking to me about it. That's how my experience was when I was watching The Next Generation. Because I mean, obviously the original Star Trek was held to such a standard, and then they started making the movies. So. But then, I finally took the plunge and started watching The Next Generation, and I actually enjoyed that more than the original, and I loved that series. So I'm glad that you got to take that chance. That's all you got to do is just take a chance, watch it, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But don't hold yourself back from the opportunity. There's
something that happens in the original series that they show in certain books and comics and in Deep Space Nine. It happens in Enterprise, and it comes through in Discovery, and it's just phenomenal.
Cool.
The things they do with some of these characters just absolutely blew me away.
Good. That's good.
Yeah, I'll be watching that in the next few weeks myself, Shane. I managed to get a friend of mine managed to get a screener copy.
Nice.
That coworker of theirs left on a desk. Basically, I don't want these anymore. Take it away. And I'm borrowing that from her right now, so I'll be watching the first season shortly.
Now, with the threat, so the second season comes out in January. There's also this Picard show in the works. There's supposed to be an animated show in the works. Yep. There's Trek Shorts, which takes place in the Discovery universe, that are like just little mini episodes happening. Eventually, there'll be enough on there that I will probably get that app, because I'm not going to go buy in all these seasons. But for right now, I just wouldn't do it just for one show.
So why did they pick Chris Pine as money so they can do another Star Trek movie?
Oh, you're not kidding, because they were supposed to bring Chris Hemsworth in it too as his father again. I don't know.
They're going to do it. They're just playing hardball right now. There's a lot more of a chance of Chris Pine playing Kirk again than there is of us getting Man of Steel Superman back. I think Cavill's done. Chris Pine more than likely is going to wind up coming back.
I hope so. I love his Kirk.
Yeah, I do too.
Yep.
Yeah, he's very good at it.
Do you guys want to pivot to this Green Lantern comic here?
Sure.
Pivot.
Shut up!
We'll end the show critiquing a good old-fashioned comic book.
Well, maybe we'll end it that way. Maybe we'll end up talking for another half an hour about this and that.
And the other thing.
That's never happened before.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
This, that, and the other thing.
All right, so we have here the first issue of the new DC ongoing series, The Green Lantern, brought to you by writer Grant Morrison and artist Liam Sharp. This is actually by listener request we're doing this. Somebody, a Twitter user by the name of James L., reached out to us via Twitter and said he thought it would be cool if CGS could sound off on this issue. So we've decided to grant you your wish, James. Thank you for the suggestion. And so we're going to do kind of a mini off the rack on this issue here. You guys mind if I start the ball rolling?
Hit it.
Go for it, brother.
Yeah.
Okay. I found this issue very enjoyable. I think it's kind of a propitious start of a new direction for Green Lantern in the DC universe. Grant Morrison takes it back to basics a little bit, refocusing on Hal Jordan himself, although, given the fact that it's supposed to be about Hal Jordan as the Green Lantern, even to the point of adding that telling little definite article to the title, it's actually a relatively small portion of the issue that deals directly with Hal Jordan himself. I mean, he doesn't. There's kind of a lengthy introductory sequence where we get to see some other Green Lanterns dealing with an issue on the casino world of Ventura. And then eventually we get around to Hal about midway through the story, and then he has to deal with the fallout of that battle on Ventura when it arrives on Earth. So we get to see Hal Jordan in action. We get to see a few other Green Lanterns, new characters, I'm pretty sure, but from familiar alien races. There's one Zudari in there, Tomar Ray's race.
Yeah.
True. So we get to see some classic Green Lantern concepts, often with a little bit of a different spin on them. And it's since Morrison is coming into this on the heels of several other people's runs on the Green Lantern and Green Lantern core characters, it's hard for me, who have been away from the Green Lantern titles for some time, to know exactly what I'm seeing here is an innovation of Morrison's and what is just kind of spinning out of the runs that preceded it. But we get the Guardians of the Universe, of course. They seem to have undergone kind of a Nehru makeover, and now they're not wearing the red robes with the Green Lantern symbols on them anymore. We've got the Controllers, who have gone the opposite direction and now are wearing uniforms that are sort of based on their own core of agents' uniforms, the Dark Stars, or as they're called in this issue, the Black Stars, who have just recently...
I was like, because I saw the Black Stars, and I'm thinking, Black Stars? That looks similar to the Dark Star uniform.
Yeah.
And then I started doing research, and I was like, oh, cool, because I like Dark Stars. That was cool.
Yep, your memory did not lead you false there. Yeah, and so that venerable 90s concept of the Dark Stars just came back.
That's awesome. That makes me enthused, yeah.
Yeah. I kind of enjoy the concept of the Dark Stars.
And I guess, correct, I don't know, this is new OA. I mean, is this something that has befallen from before? Because I'm not aware, obviously, as well.
Yeah, that probably is a fallout from earlier Green Lantern stories. It might have been that old OA may have been destroyed again. It's goodness knows it's happened more than once.
Sure.
Yeah, but so we've got it's kind of classic Green Lantern action, but with a kind of a new twist. This is, and I hope some of our listeners from the British Isles can back me up here, but this strikes me as the most 2000 AD take on Green Lantern that comics have ever seen. Just Morrison's storytelling style, the dialogue he uses, the quirky alien dialects he employs, Liam Sharp's artwork, which is very sharp.
Yeah.
Yes, and yes, the way he draws the alien physiology and then the facial expressions he uses, it kind of evokes the early work of Alan Davis. And that's really all any artist ever needs to do to curry my favor, is to make me think of Alan Davis. So yes, visually it's great. I like the fact that we don't see those distracting little holographic Green Lantern symbols in front of the various lanterns' chests. So again, kudos to the art team for that. The story is kind of intriguing. It's kind of straightforward. One of Morrison's ideas for this series was to really play up the intergalactic policeman aspect. So it's going to be kind of a cop show, a police procedural even, but set in outer space with all the usual cosmic weirdness. And so he brings us that, and he kind of restrains himself, I think, as far as weirdness goes. I mean, some of you here may have seen something Jamal Igle posted a while ago on Facebook about how he thought this was just Morrison being weird for the sake of weird, and he wasn't sure how much time he had for it. And Jamal, I love you, man. I respect your opinions, but I've got to say this is not really the weirdest Grant Morrison's I've ever read. I mean, this is. I read Green Lantern stories that weren't even written by Morrison that are weirder and less straightforward than this.
I just turn you to the Invisibles, and then you're all set.
Oh my God, yeah, for real.
Oh boy.
Did you hear that didn't it get picked up for like a TV show or something? Anybody else hear that?
You may be right.
I think I just read it. It was like last week or something. They said something about that. They got that picked up. That the Invisibles is going to be like some show or something.
Wow.
I don't know where it's going to be on, but I don't know if it's going to be a Netflix or something like that. But
I kind of hope
is it going to be non-linear? How are they going to do that?
I don't know, and that's what I'm saying. When I saw they were picking up, I was like, "Wow, that's a task."
Yeah.
You know, that's not an easy thing to interpret.
Yeah.
You know,
it definitely is not, and I'm kind of hoping that it does go to Netflix.
yeah, I would think it would be more leaning to something like that rather than a network show. Yeah,
exactly. Network interference would just
destroy it. Yeah.
But yeah, this is good cosmic adventure. Really, it's all the bizarre alien races and stuff. It's just a good fun to me. The story is not difficult to follow at all. There's some tantalizing little hints at what's coming up in the future. And this last page here with the coming soon, some images of some dark stars or black stars. Another Green Lantern, Green Arrow team up is in the offing, and Green Lanterns from across the multiverse. Since Morrison is the one who seems to have adopted the multiverse concept and most made it his own in the New 52 and Rebirth era of DC. Other artists or writers have played with it, but Morrison is he's been the architect so far. I'm happy to see him bringing in some other reality Green Lanterns. One thing I wanted to bring to the room's attention early on here, the page when the Guardian, I'm going to assume it's Ganthet because it's almost always Ganthet, who is talking to Hal about the Oa, the Book of Oa, and how it's no longer trustworthy.
Yeah.
And you notice what symbol is hanging in the middle of that image of the Book of Oa. It's the sigil of Dr. Manhattan, that stylized hydrogen atom.
Oh, yeah.
Look
well
at that.
done.
So, that's Morrison leaning into that. I don't know if that's he's actually planning to follow up on that as a plot point in the future, or if he's just sticking that in here as a way of saying anything that you see in this book that doesn't line up with past continuity of the Green Lantern titles, Dr. Manhattan did it. A wizard did it.
Well, I can't see just him throwing it in for the sake of throwing it in. There's got to be
there's a
to it,
reason.
Yeah.
So it's just nice to see that acknowledged, the sort of thing that's happening in Doomsday Clock acknowledged elsewhere in the DCU right now. And it's also smart of Morrison because it kind of gets him off the hook for anything that he violates from the previously established continuity of the book that he's picking up here. But yeah, this is a good Green Lantern comic. Like I said, it's solid, accessible, it's refreshing and fun. It's got all the elements that a good Green Lantern story really ought to have, or at least the beginnings of them. And it's made me the most excited to be reading a Green Lantern series since about 2005. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if we were still using our old buy, borrow, pants system, this would be an absolute buy for me. I mean, the $4.99 price tag, as Chris alluded to earlier, is a little trying.
It
hurts.
Totally ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah,
do you guys mind if I jump in? Because let me give you some very boring behind the scenes of Chris's life. I have to submit marking period grades in the next hour. So
it is Thanksgiving week. That's true.
To deal with that. But if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in and give my take. I appreciate it. I should give some context, because when we were talking about the Spider-Man stories early on in the episode, and I said, I read the Green Lantern, I don't care. Let me clarify that, because I really enjoyed this book. I meant that more in the sense of, the continuity and all that I used to love about the old stories. I just don't feel that anymore. But that doesn't take away from, I think this is an outstandingly produced comic. Now, first of all, I love Liam Sharp's artwork. My first exposure to him, I think, was when he did some Man-Thing stories, the J.M. DeMatteis, back in maybe in the late 90s. Remember that Strange Tales book?
Yeah, it was Man-Thing, and was it Cloak and Dagger or Werewolf? We're folded into that together.
But Liam Sharp did since the Man-Thing. I remember they were breathtaking. Even Howard the Duck was there. The art was gorgeous. So I always remembered his name. And the minute I opened this book, I was just floored with the quality of the artwork. And I'm very happy that one of my favorite colorists from Preacher, Steve Olive, is doing the coloring on this. And that really comes through beautifully. And, of course, the great classic letter Tom Morzakowski is involved. Top-flight creative team. And this is one of those comics where I'm so just taken with the art, because if you look at the pages where Hal is in the brawl with the aliens or incognito, and I love where he puts his fist in the guy's mouth to hit his brain. The artwork has this wonderful, illustrative, pulpy quality to it. It's almost like I'm looking at an Al Williamson or an Alex Toth type of artwork. It's really beautifully done. And you'll notice there's a contrast between when Hal is Earthbound and the civilian guys, and then when he's the Green Lantern. The art has a different feel to it, just as wonderful. But I think this is some of the greatest work I've seen Liam Sharp ever produce, at least of the work of his that I've read over my life as a comic book reader. This is a stunningly beautiful comic book. Still not worth $5, but don't get me started on that. But it's beautifully done. And I agree with Murd. I mean, I've always enjoyed the Green Lantern character. I also have not followed him lately, for the most part. But I love the whole space cop concept, and clearly Morrison is really going to explore that. But what sold me on this book, besides the art, if you turn to the page, it's right near the end. It's like the penultimate page, and there's 5 horizontal panels, and they're describing the different Green Lanterns. I just have to read, because this is pure Morrisonian. From the lightless obsidian deeps of the supervoids to the shattered source wall that separates our material universe from sublime and non-dual omni-awareness. So I was like, all right, I'm in. It's Grant Morrison waxing rhapsodic about the cosmic order of things when it comes to the Green Lanterns. Then they talk about like the X-ray Green Lantern, the radio lanterns. They show these different incarnations of Green Lanterns.
Yep.
So much fun.
The guy in the top panel there is actually from the Obsidian Deeps. That's a Green Lantern called, he calls himself the F. Sharp Bell because he's from a race of eyeless alien beings who have no concept of light or color. So instead, he channels his emerald energy as sound waves. I think that's a Alan Moore creation. Actually, it's
fantastic.
So Morrison has done his homework. So clearly, he knows some of the Lantern continuity.
Well, yeah, and I love that, Murd, and also just like how the one Green Lantern's like a virus. That's how they defeat the one alien.
Yeah. Floozle Flim doesn't catch you.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You catch Floozle Flim. Anybody else reminded of the Disney's Sword in the Stone by that? Mm-hmm. The wizard's duel between Merlin and Madame Mim. He becomes the virus. But anyway, please continue, Chris.
And of course, brother. I always appreciate your waxing rhapsodic there. But our glorious co-founder Brian Deemer, when he was on last time he was on an episode, he really panned Green Lantern. I've always really enjoyed the Green Lantern concept, just from the wacky use of the ring to Hal as a character, and how really what a conflicted character is in many ways. And I always like Kyle Rayner too. I know Shane's a Kyle Rayner fan. But this was just a lot of fun, and it set up so many wonderful possibilities for the character going forward. And God, I hope Liam Sharp is on it as long as possible, because just looking at that coming soon page, look at that Green Arrow, Green Lantern shot. Man!
Yeah.
So exciting. And Murd, my last question before I depart is, who is the Weaponeer? I don't know who that is.
I'm not sure either. I mean, it looks to me like Bizarro Yellow Lantern is what they're dissecting there.
That's what it looks like to me, too.
Yeah, but the word Weaponeer always invokes the antimatter world of Quard.
And it looks like he has a yellow Sinestro Corps kind of shirt on.
So at the very least, he's someone who was a member of the Sinestro Corps.
Yeah.
If not Bizarro Yellow Lantern. Although Bizarro Yellow Lantern was also a member of Sinestro Corps, it should be mentioned.
Well, this is a strong. As I depart, John, this is a strong buy for me too. I mean, if you can get it for less than $5, because I mean, I'm antediluvian. I find a floppy comic that's pretty much normal size is $5 is just absurd. But it's an excellent comic. Definitely a strong buy for me. And brothers, I apologize. I must depart to finish some scholastic duties. Mm-hmm. But Kevin, Ian, thanks for joining us.
Oh, man, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Absolutely magnificent.
Chris. Great to hang out with you guys, and especially you as well, Chris. And obviously, you got life to take care of, so...
Yeah.
Indeed.
We all
I know you all
that.
Understand that, of course.
Absolutely.
And Shane, Murd, we'll all talk soon, brothers.
Sounds good, Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
Happy
Good night,
Thanksgiving
guys.
to
Take
you
care.
and the whole
Happy
clan, Chris.
Yes, happy
Happy
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving to you all, brothers. Take care.
Thanksgiving.
Good night. Bye.
So long.
Okay.
All right, Ian, since we know that you also are a big Kyle Rayner fan, why don't you take the ball next?
Oh yes. In fact, there are very few Hal Jordan stories that I would prefer over Kyle Rayner stories. That's my personal preference. Kyle was my Green Lantern growing up, and I still love him to this day. I personally saw it as a step backwards, bringing back Hal Jordan, considering how many years he was the Spectre. I actually really enjoyed him as the Spectre. I think that was a very interesting direction to take the character post-Parallax. And then when Jeff Johns decided to bring him back, a lot of the other Green Lanterns went to the wayside until the Green Lantern Corps title really fleshed them out again. But it always sort of felt like they were still also-rans, like Hal was the main Green Lantern, and then everybody else was to the side. Now we have a comic called The Green Lantern, starring Hal Jordan as the main, and all the other Green Lanterns are off to the side. And they canceled what was essentially the Green Lantern Corps title to prepare for this. They also, which was Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, and they also canceled the Green Lanterns title that was coming out, so that they would just have one Green Lantern title running. And if memory serves, this wasn't originally going to be an in-continuity story. I know that...
Yeah, All-Star Green Lantern, I think?
Yes. I believe that was the original title they were going for this, but I guess they liked what Grant was doing enough to make it in continuity, and we'll have to see where it goes from here. But from this first issue, I'm digging the whole detective angle they're going with right now. The one way that I prefer Hal is as a space cop, because Kyle's much more creative, and Hal has to have something going for him, and he has the space cop angle. He has the detective aspect. I'm going to go investigate what's going on here, and then I'm going to go save the day. And Grant seems to be working with that very well by crafting the mystery that he is here, with the Weaponeer and with this this truth device. This luck device that they have as the MacGuffin of the issue. Fascinates me a little bit. Liam Sharp's art, and I wonder if you guys agree with me on this. It feels like he keeps going back and forth between a Jerry Ordway style and something closer to another, Grant Morrison collaborator, Frank Quitely, especially in Faces. Like, I feel like he's going for something much more traditional, and then you flip the page, and once you get more space and alien, you get something a little bit more Quitely-esque, something that's a little bit less on model, as it were, and something that might be a little bit more magical or alien in aspect. And I like it. It does lead to a little bit of an inconsistency in the book itself, but I understand what he's trying to go with there. And I'd be wondering to see how it's going to go in future issues. But overall, it has me intrigued. It's definitely Morrison weird. It's got that going for it. And I'll have to see how it goes, say, by the time we get to about issue 6, whether or not we're getting story or whether or not we're getting more and more mystery, because Morrison could fall into that trap sometimes. I need something that actually keeps me going, as opposed to introducing new concepts and being like, oh, well, what about this? What about this? I want to see where this is going to go right now with the Weaponeer. I want to see where it's going with some of the inconsistencies with the book, and I want to see where it's going with Hal Jordan living on people's couches.
Right. Big space hero in outer space and social parasite on Earth.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But I dig it enough to give it more of a shot. But I'm definitely not paying the $5. Like, I will 100% thank my co-host Brent Cassina for giving me access to this title, because I am no way paying $5 digitally for one comic book. You got to be kidding me. Yeah. That's getting way up there. And it wasn't even like this was, that many more pages than a standard comic.
No. I have a hard enough time $4, let alone $5. Yeah. I mean, I have as much a problem with a $4 book as you guys have with a $5 book. But so I mean, I agree with you there. I just think that's ridiculous. I don't care what creator's on the book. It's not. Yep. I think you're really. I mean, I know that could be a whole other episode in and of itself, but I mean, I just think you're really hurting the industry. I really do. I mean, absolutely. I think you're isolating readers. You're making them decide between books and such like that, because there's only so much money to go around.
As these prices keep going up, I keep dropping things.
Yeah, I mean,
and waiting for a trade, or now again with that library app, I'll look stuff up on there easily.
I don't understand it. It just doesn't. I know it obviously is business motivated and such, but I mean, obviously, it just, to me, is just a wrong move. But
Let's just think about the fact, Kevin, that I bought a complete Grant Morrison series for the same price.
Yeah.
One Grant Morrison book.
Yeah, exactly. No, I totally understand, man.
Yeah,
I
but-
totally do.
Adjusting for inflation, just to pretending that this comic had a normal cover price, would you consider it a buy then, as far as our rating systems go?
What do you consider a normal cover price?
At most $2.
Well, from the days when comics were a little
Didn't
more
exceed $3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have paid $2.99 with and then had 40% off on DCBS for this. Yes, if I was still buying it that way, I would have definitely given this a buy. As it is right now, if Brent continues buying it, I'll continue reading his copies. So I guess you call that a borrow.
Yeah, you got to put it in context. That's how I look at it. You know what I mean? It's like if you enjoyed it, that's great, and you obviously express that. But yeah, to actually give it a whole buy, grading, as far as the system goes, yeah, that's a tough one to make, go that way.
Absolutely.
It was a good setup book. I mean, I read it and I liked what was going on. It intrigued me about a couple of different things, and I'm like, okay, well, if it got me intrigued, well, then obviously I'm enjoying what I'm reading. And I never heard of these X-ray lanterns and things like this, so I'm like, okay. It seems to me like it's another way of doing, like, they did the spectrum with motions. This is a different take on that, so to speak.
Yep. In a recent Justice League issue, we saw John Stewart get an ultraviolet lantern.
Yes, we did.
There you go. So yeah, that's kind of cool. I mean, it's. I definitely looked at it as it's enough. I didn't sit there and I didn't think it was a great book. I thought it was a really good book. It's a good book, and it has me intrigued to see where they go with it. I like Hal as a character. Green Lantern's one of my favorite DC characters, always has been. And the thing is, unlike most of you, I like both. I like Hal and I like Kyle. I mean,
I'm more that way too.
You know what I mean? I liked Hal for who he was and who he is, and just as the whole Barry Allen, Wally West, Kyle's uniquely different enough that it's like it's a different character. So it's not just a Green Lantern.
Sometimes you want a Mounds, and sometimes you want an I'm enjoyed.
Exactly. So so I look forward to reading a Hal book, but it's not that he has to be it confuses me with that when they say the Green Lantern. Well, how can you say that when you have a whole core of Green Lanterns? Yeah. That I don't get. That just doesn't, as me as a reader, that's almost like misleading, or you're putting a spotlight on one character saying he's better than all the rest, and
I'm not sure Morrison's actually going to live up to that.
I doubt it too, and that's why I said I'm more open to believing that it's going to be just a nice solid Green Lantern book, not a Hal book.
He's not going to be able to resist all these other delightful, weird, and diverse characters.
And that's when I heard that this was happening, I was enthused because with him being on it, I thought, you know what. His, weirdness and quirkiness and all that stuff, he brings that into the book and doing the space, cop opera kind of thing. I mean, it could add an element to it that, is very unique and different. And so I'm excited for that. Because I think when you get into these books and you get into seeing other galaxies and different planets and other life forms and stuff, you got to think outside the box. It's like I find it, almost boring when I see these alien races and they're all humanoid, bipedal. I'm like, you got to think outside the box. That whole virus thing just made me laugh. I was like, that's cool.
That's a fantastic addition.
Yeah, it's like, but I remember
named it Floozle Phlegm.
Floozle Phlegm, yeah. But I mean, when I read, Green Lantern books growing up, in the 70s and such, and you had all these different Green Lanterns, that were in these other books, and they're all, you had the crystal one that, was like round, and so they were all different. And I like that. It was unique, and that's how it should be. And I believe you're going to get this and more with Morrison and Liam Sharp. I mean, Liam Sharp is a solid artist. I can understand, what you guys are saying as far as our artistal art, comparisons, that I can see everyone that you guys have mentioned. I can see that in the artwork, so I can understand why you guys would see it that way. And I think it's just solid art. And it was noticeable difference from, him being on Earth and being in these other galaxies and areas of space. So I think that's important to do. I think it leaves atmosphere for the reader and makes it very distinctly when he is on Earth and when he's not. And I think that's important if you're going to do this type of setup, because a lot of times before it's either or, and if they're going to continue to, focus on both, then I think obviously that's kind of a key part for the artist to kind of hammer that point home. I like Green Lantern for both those reasons. I like the space cop thing, but I also really used to look forward to and enjoy when he used to do stories on Earth. Because I think he can get so caught up in the whole space thing that it almost kind of makes it not so unique, as a character. So I like seeing. I'd be happy to see a story or two or storyline take place on Earth. With having
Sure.
So and I think it's feasible for this to happen. So I definitely feel it's a good setup book. And it was something I was looking forward to reading. I was curious to see how Morrison was going to do his take on the character, and I'm definitely into seeing what goes from here. Like you said, do the whole borrow, buy, whole kind of thing. I mean, yeah, I would do the same thing as far as I would recommend it. I didn't know with Liam Sharp's art, I didn't know how it was going to be. I mean, I was getting like a Jeff Darrow, and that kind of vibe from it too. But I enjoyed it. I think it's solid. I mean, just looking at that page there, it almost looks Neil Adams-ish, that panel there.
I see that.
Yeah.
So
Jordan and the Guardian, the bottom panel.
So yeah, it's great. I mean, like I said, it's one of my favorite DC characters, and if they do something great with it, I'm all in, man. So.
I fell away from Green Lantern with the whole New 52 and Rebirth universe and all that. Yeah. I enjoyed... Ian, I'll agree with you that I was not thrilled with bringing him back originally, because just like bringing back Barry, just like bringing back anybody who gave something so much in the story to sacrifice themselves, at the time I don't necessarily see a need. Now, given Blackest Night and everything that ensued after that, sure, I'm glad he came back. It was a great story, and I read all of that. But when it came to the New 52 and Rebirth, I read a few things, didn't necessarily care for the direction, and fell away from it. I enjoyed this issue more than most Green Lantern things I've read recently. It was eccentric enough, which is what I expected from Morrison, to be a little bit out there. But it makes sense to be a little bit out there with all the space craziness that's going on here. I love the artwork through the whole book. I like that it's distinct between what you see in space and what you see on Earth. I think that helps separate what's happening in the story until such a time when it comes together, even as it starts to in the end, with him being given a lantern to use to power back up and become the Green Lantern again, fully.
Yeah, because that was something that was kind of confusing to me too, like with the whole new O. It was like, I can't use my ring because the Guardians are... renewing my
took
lantern.
It for an upgrade.
Yeah, and I'm like, what?
That part was a little weird. So that stuff could all be things I have not.
Well, they just released a new Power Lantern XS, so they need to upgrade that and change the power cable too.
Jeez, Ams. Even Lantern needs an upgrade.
I love the design of all the characters and all the craziness that happens with all the space aliens you see. I think that's welcome in a Green Lantern book. I love the aspect of becoming a space cop again, more so than just a Green Lantern that goes around with the Justice League or doing things in space. I like the detective side of it as well, and I hope we do see more of that. I'm very intrigued by the Weaponeer, because I couldn't tell if it was like a Twisted Hal or, like you said, Bizarro Green Lantern. It interests me that they threw that in there, and it looks very much like Hal. And I like that it has, like you said, the Weaponeer is always synonymous with Weaponeer of Quard, which created the yellow ring that you see them with the yellow shirt in that panel.
Yeah.
I agree the price is way too high. But I did pre-order, because I go through DCBS, the first few issues of it to see how it goes. And then I'll start looking at probably the trades or something like that. Unless something really grabs a hold of me for the story, I would definitely recommend getting it and reading it. It's a great starting point after all the stuff that's happened with Green Lantern in the last few years. a great way to recenter itself and start over and give a fresh start with throwing some good homage to how he became Green Lantern, with kind of finding a lantern, getting the power,
in the middle
power
of the desert
battery in the
from an
middle of the
alien.
and even making a joke about it while he's doing it through the issue. I liked all of that, and it brings people who may not have read Green Lantern the last few years, or maybe ever, to a good starting point and a good semi-origin to kick off what's going to happen now. And we'll see what happens from there. I do hope that it's just not only about Hal and some of these guys, or all of the rest of the Corps, are pushed to the side, because I don't want to see that. I miss Guy Gardner. I miss Kyle Rayner and John Stewart being so prominent in Green Lantern stories.
Yeah, I do hope that. Yeah, well, Kyle and Guy will probably be seen eventually, and John, he's being used elsewhere.
And I know that they did their thing with the whole last Green Lantern Corps book. You saw all of them come through. At least a couple issues I read here and there. They were there, but I like the way it was maybe a few years ago, Blackest Night, and before that, and I want to come back to that a little bit. And I think this has a chance to do that.
Well, to be honest, I'm worried about Kyle, especially with Heroes in Crisis going on right now.
I'm not talking about that part, really.
Right. Other characters, more or less of his generation, have already fared poorly there. So your fears may be well-founded. But, of course, we've been worried about Kyle for close to 20 years now, and he's still around.
This whole antimatter lantern thing intrigues me. I mean, I'm sure it intrigues you as well, Murd, considering your Crisis love.
You betcha. Plus my love for cosmic MacGuffin hunts. Searching for objects of power, be they infinity gems or Dragon Balls. Just gather them together and stick them in that crazy Frankenstein Hal's chest and see what happens.
Nice.
I just watched the Dragon Ball Battle of the Gods movie this past weekend, the one that basically just weeds into Dragon Ball Super and whatnot, and that was a lot of fun. But yeah, no. Part of me wonders too whether or not this antimatter lantern may have very well come from the Dark Universe.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because it does look a lot like Hal.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder if perhaps it's one of the dark versions of Hal that didn't turn out so good.
Yeah, well, we'll probably have a big Batman logo plastered all over it if that were the case. Since apparently every single living creature in the Dark Multiverse is a Batman clone,
which I find a bit odd. But I mean, I love Batman, but that's weird.
Yeah, that is weird.
I'd rather have evil versions of everybody.
Yeah, with mustaches.
Yeah, and red uniforms. Give me the
goatee.
Yeah. Well, to weigh in on the whole Hal versus Kyle thing, I got to tell you, there was a time, and a fairly long time in my career as a fan, where I considered Hal Jordan my favorite character in comics. But this time coincided with the time when Hal Jordan was absent from comics, or at least as Green Lantern, when he was Parallax, and then he was dead, and then he was the Spectre. And I agree with you, Ian, that his time at the Spectre, as the Spectre, was a very interesting time in comics. The J.M. DeMatteis the series with Hal as the Spectre was some interesting experimental stuff, but a little bit too high concept for the average reader, I'm getting the feeling. DC swept it under the rug pretty quickly and said that just about everything that happened in that series was just like hallucinations that Hal's whole soul was experiencing while bonded with the Spectre. But then Hal came back in 2005. You guys said you had your misgivings about that. I was all for it until I saw it actually happen, and I saw how Jeff Johns was writing the character, and he bored me half to death. He just seemed like this two-dimensional, square-jawed macho caricature who was just the greatest Green Lantern because a whole generation of fans apparently thought that he was the greatest Green Lantern, not because of any actual merits that showed up on the page. So I kind of, as I've said several times on this podcast before, fell in love with the idea of Hal more than I actually enjoyed more than I was familiar with the character as he'd actually appeared in comics of the past. And when he finally came back in 2005, he kind of disappointed me. So, yeah, and then I was like, oh, yeah, Kyle Rayner actually might be a more interesting character than Hal after all. So that's why I'm glad we've had them both around. And talking of Hal and his shortcomings, and talking also of the possibility of the space cop detective stuff and the disproportionate emphasis on Hal, I think Hal is a good space cop, but he's more the enforcer, peacekeeper kind of space cop. You know, a shoot first, ask questions later, or never kind of guy. He doesn't strike me as cerebral enough to make a very good space detective. So maybe what Morrison will do is partner him up with one or a series of other Green Lanterns, maybe aliens from other sectors, maybe Kyle at some point, to help pick up his slack in the forensics department.
Could be, yeah.
So let's hold out hope for that.
Yeah. Who knows?
So, Shane and Kevin, by the way, if you're going to rank it as a buy, borrow, or pants, what do you think you'd...
I'd give it a buy if you can stomach paying for it. It's definitely worth a read. Otherwise, if you can borrow it, go ahead. I don't know if this... I can't remember when I ordered the next 2 issues, if it was still this $5 price or if this was just for the first issue that it was $5. I have such a hard time with anything $4 and $5, period. Comic book wise, it drives me nuts, and that's just not specific to this Green Lantern issue. It's really any book. It drives me insane that comics are this high, and again, I've said it. I keep cutting back because I do want to get certain things, and one of them's Justice League. And in order to do that and keep going with these Justice League titles, there are things that get sacrificed as a result of it. That's just my collecting, what my interests lie, and $5 books, man. That makes it an easy choice to cut some of those when it gets to that high.
So I believe you're a biro like me.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd say if you take out of context of the whole argument about the actual price tag,
it's a great book.
I would have to give it a buy tag. I would just say that it's a fun book. It's an interesting book. There's a lot. You can see that it's thought through, and there's enough there that intrigues me to want to see where things go and what happens. I enjoyed all aspects of it, so I definitely would recommend a buy.
Awesome. So we're all in agreement then that it's a good story.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely,
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a worthwhile
Fantastic
read. So,
all right, gentlemen, before we wrap up, I have something else that I'd like to share with you guys. So I got home today about an hour before we got started, and there was a package on my doorstep.
I saw your picture.
Yeah, and I was like, I wasn't really expecting anything, and then it hit me. I tried to lift it, and it was heavy as hell, and I'm like, oh right. When I was at New York Comic Con, I went to the Publishers Weekly booth, and they were doing a raffle. And if you won the raffle, you would then win a bunch of books. And I do it almost compulsively. I don't expect to ever win these things.
Sure.
So I put my name in. And then, lo and behold, about a week ago, I get an email from someone at Publishers Weekly telling me that I won. And I'm like, oh, great. Fantastic. So what did I win? Okay, well, we're going to send you a box. And just so you know, the box is going to be over 40 pounds in weight. I'm like, okay. I get home today. I bring it upstairs, and the books that I received include Tomb Raider Library Edition, Volume 1, the deluxe edition of Scott Snyder's Swamp Thing, Marvelocity, the Marvel Comics Art of Alex Ross.
Wow.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Homestuck Volumes 1, 2, and 3. That's a webcomic that the kids are crazy about. Fight Club 2, the trade paperback. My Hero Academia Vigilantes Volume 1. Hasib and the Queen of Serpents, which looks very interesting. I'll have to check that out for sure. John Ridley's The American Way. Devilman, which is a famous manga that's years old. And The Best We Could Do, an illustrated memoir by, I believe his name is Thi Bui. And yeah, Scotty Young's I Hate Fairyland as well.
Wow.
Jeez.
Wow.
That's an awesome box.
Over 40 pounds, yeah.
Over 40 pounds, and I'm almost overwhelmed by it. Oh, and I forgot to mention also the first 9 issues in hardcover of the illustrated American Gods adaptation.
Wow.
Huh.
Yeah. So I got a lot of reading. I got
That's
a lot
awesome,
of reading.
dude.
Ahead of me.
That's
That's
quality
fantastic.
reading, too.
Yeah, that's
Congratulations
awesome.
there.
Congratulations, man.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That was a good win.
You ain't kidding. Especially since when I got the email, I'm like, I don't even really remember doing this, but I guess I did. Okay.
See, I'd have gotten that. I'm like, are you sure you got the right person?
I wasn't going to turn it down, but
No.
either way, like, all right, fine, why not?
Wow.
Sure, I'll take your books.
That's cool. That's cool.
Good times.
Right. Well, I had a couple more things I wanted to bring up.
Sure.
Maybe just briefly. Particularly, the last one is one that I wanted a couple of you guys to chime in on. First, just in the interest of topicality, some late-breaking comics news that came up today. I'm kind of sorry Chris isn't still here, because this is a comic that he and I were both interested in. A series called Dead Rabbit. It was coming out from Image. It's kind of a crime fiction thing. It's written by Jerry Duggan, art by John McCrae. It was about a masked master thief who called himself Dead Rabbit. Loosely based on or inspired by an actual 19th century New York City mobster. Apparently there is a pub-restaurant kind of thing in New York City called the Dead Rabbit. And they have the trademark lockdown on the phrase Dead Rabbit,
Oh, for heaven's
including the publishing of comic books, because they published some menus, cookbooks,
Wow.
recipe guides, or cocktail guides, etc., in comic book form. So now they slapped Image with a cease and desist on Dead Rabbit.
Oh. Wow.
So it's... So
Just change the title to Dead Rarebit.
Oh, crap.
Fiends. Yeah. So any of you out there who have copies of Dead Rabbit numbers 1 or 2, hold on to them, because they might be collector's items. Image has issued a recall on both of those.
Wow.
Issues 3 and 4 have been canceled. DCBS just told me via an email today.
Wow.
So,
Deceased Fowl, coming soon from Image Comics.
deceased fowl. Yeah, they'll just change the character's mask to look like a dead bird.
Wow, an Image book that's going to be a collector's item.
We thought those
took me
days
back-
would
bring it
never
back
come
to the
again.
90s.
That just took me back 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a fun little tidbit. And now, Shane,
Yep.
Ian,
Yep.
Yep.
where my Poke Peeps at? What did you think of that Detective Pikachu trailer?
Yes.
I might go see that. That looks really good.
I am definitely seeing that. Ian?
Wow.
So okay, mind you, and I'll make this right here. I used to work for Pokemon. Anybody who is unaware of that, I worked for the Pokemon Company as a contractor for a couple of years, and I'm pretty close to a lot of these characters. And I got to tell you, I really never expected Pikachu to be that textured. Like the hair and whatnot, like
Yeah.
Mr. Mime creeps me the hell out.
He always did, even in non-hyper rendered form.
Yes, indeed. But I am thoroughly intrigued by this. I think
Yeah.
this may actually turn out to be it. It may not be good, but it sure as hell is going to be insane.
Which is as good any day nowadays.
Yes. So I am definitely down for it. I may even be opening day down for it
Wow.
with my friends,
That's high
especially if Alamo Drafthouse does a special menu, because I'm
Okay.
hoping they do. If they do a Pokemon themed menu and they have like Poffin on the menu and like Miltank burgers and stuff like that, I'm immediately down.
Or at the very least, Miltank shakes.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by that. I saw it come across the feed somewhere. I'm like, what the hell is this? And I started, and I'm like, well, and then it kept going. I'm like, oh, that looks pretty good, actually, and it looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's granting a couple of fan wishes I've had for Pokemon for a number of years now. I mean, I've thought, literally two. I thought, for one, that we would one day get a good live-action Pokemon movie with some great CGI creature effects and maybe a little Jim Henson creature shop puppetry thrown in for good measure. I
Sure.
don't think we're getting that here, but from what I've seen of the animation,
It looks phenomenal.
It's really top-notch. I mean, I won't even miss the puppets.
Yep.
So there's that, and also I've always been open to the idea of seeing some seamier, grittier takes on a world, almost noirish, of a world in which Pokemon and humans coexist.
Yeah.
And what we've got here is kind of splitting the difference between the two. I mean, it's definitely family-friendly, so it's not going to be too seamy and too noirish, but it's a couple of little Pikachu-sized steps in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks visually great. I'm sure the story is going to be interesting. The casting of the voice of Pikachu is maybe a little on the nose, a little too on trend, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But he's going to be good.
I was big for Danny DeVito, to be entirely honest.
I will see DeVito in almost anything.
Yeah, right.
I think that'd be a little bit standoffish, though, as a character. What are you talking about? Come on!
It would have made it a little bit more Roger Rabbit-esque for me. I
use a quick attack. Yeah.
Yes. No, Ryan Reynolds is definitely the fish of the day, to say the least. He's been attached to almost everything. It didn't surprise me about him being Detective Pikachu when it was announced.
Yeah, does make some sense, and I'm sure he'll do a good job.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and speaking of Ryan Reynolds, has anybody seen the trailer to the PG-13 Deadpool 2 release?
No.
Yeah, I did. I watched it 2 days ago. Yeah.
I'll have to look that up.
Fred Savage.
So, it's excellent.
I did hear about that.
It's excellent timing because the writer of The Princess Bride died this week.
Yeah.
So the fact that we have something that's William Goldman's has done a lot over the years, but he's mostly known for Princess Bride, or mainly known for Princess Bride, and the fact that we have a Princess Bride pastiche as the wrapping for this PG-13 re-release, which, mind you, is essentially a cash grab because they're re-releasing it. They won't admit this, but primarily so it can be released in China. Because the original cut was banned from China, and this one is going to be able to be released there.
Okay.
Yeah, I was talking to Matt about it, and I said, what would be curious for me is to not only obviously see how many people go see it now, but I really would like to know statistically how many people are seeing it again, and how many people are seeing it for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be curious just to see, because obviously it's gonna do well. Mm-hmm. It's not an issue with that.
I think there's going to be a lot of repeat viewers.
I
just
think
to
so
see
too.
what new jokes they came up with to take the place of the.
Hopefully, it's
racist
more
stuff.
than the little DVD tidbits you get, when they entice you to all the deleted scenes or the blooper reels, and they're like freaking 13 seconds long. It's like.
And $1 of each ticket sold is going to F Cancer, which they're renaming Frick Cancer for the time it's out.
That's cool of them. That's nice that they do.
Oh,
that's a good idea.
Yeah, whether they go with the R-rated version or the PG-13 rated version, the money is going to a good cause.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. My favorite line in the trailer is, they're talking about the re-release, and Fred Savage says, "Well, I mean, isn't it kind of like if the Beatles songs were written by Nickelback?"
Yeah. Yeah, he said something too in regards to the Fox Marvel. Well, you're not really like Marvel. You're like, the Fox. I was like, this is good. This is good.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
I have to say, for a character like that, I never read Deadpool. I was like one of those things that I know obviously he had this huge following and everybody enjoyed him as a character, and I was just like, I'm never really interested to read him.
Me either. I have tried, and I can't stand trying to read Deadpool.
So it's like,
but the movies are hilarious.
Oh, I know. It's such a great thing that they, you have this other extension of it because, I thoroughly enjoy the movies.
Yeah.
It's great. It's like a parody on the industry, and
especially the second one. Oh my god!
Yeah, and it's just they're fun and they're great and they're superhero movies and it's awesome. It's
and the extended unrated cut that's on the Deadpool 2 Blu-ray adds in some scenes that are even more outrageous and obscene.
Oh.
that are pretty great, including one end credits scene that they weren't allowed to put in theaters.
Oh, I think I did read about that. Yeah, I read about that scene.
Huh.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. But both of you guys, I think you would appreciate reading the cable Deadpool run that Fabian Nicieza did. If you're gonna read any Deadpool, I think that would be the most to your tastes.
Yeah,
I
just recently read the first issue of that, Ian, so that gives you an idea of where I'm at here.
Oh.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
And I'd also recommend the Joe Kelly run, which
Okay.
is the very first Deadpool ongoing series from like 1997.
Yeah.
The character hadn't been played out yet at that point.
Maybe I'll give it another go.
It was just something that it's a character that can invoke some fun and add some different thing. But I was just never intrigued. Like, I could read a whole series of this. I didn't think it would be something that I
and now to flip through Marvel's previews and like every other page is Deadpool. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, I don't know. There's like you say, there's it's a whole nother episode. But I mean, the whole thing of the whole influence of movies and how it's affecting the industry is not going well as far as my opinion. But we'll continue that conversation at another time.
That could be a great debate, actually.
Yeah, I would like to do that. So I think we should.
Yeah, I'd be down for that.
Put a pin in that for certain.
Sounds good.
For the time being, though, anybody else have any other topics they'd like to see covered here tonight?
Well, in my recent shipment, I got the next volume of the Wonder Woman from Earth 1.
Oh, the Morrison.
Yeah, so I'll start reading that soon.
Yeah, I want to read that.
I'll tell you what, I still stand by every Earth 1 graphic novel that's come out. I have enjoyed thoroughly. I have not disliked any of them.
No, I agree with you. I read both Supermans. I read the Batman. I read the Green Lantern, Gabriel Hartman, and I'm anxious to read this one. I was like, wow, I'd love to. I remember reading the articles about Grant Morrison and him doing this Wonder Woman story and how he went back and playing on Marston, and all the stuff that he did and invoked into this character and how because wasn't it something that he had put in and then they weren't going to publish it or something like that? Or
it could be.
Because it was too much, or something, and then they did decide to do it with this Earth 1? Because I thought it was supposed to be another entity in publishing, and then I think they kind of got cold feet with it or something, and then...
Yeah.
And then decided the only way they could do it probably was to do it through the Earth 1 title,
It may have originally been All-Star Wonder Woman, if I remember.
It could be.
Yeah, you're right, Ian. You're right. Yeah. I knew it was some other facility, but it just made me and intrigued me. Wanted to read it even more. To how far and what Morrison does with the characters. So
I wish they'd put them out a little bit more frequently for the different things. I mean, it's Batman, Superman, Green Lantern, Teen Titans, and Wonder Woman. I think are it.
I haven't read the Titans one, but yeah, I liked them. I enjoyed them.
Yeah.
Well, if the thing that's going to get me to sign up for DC Universe's app is once that Young Justice new season comes out.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. You're right, man.
You know how much that means to you, Ian.
I signed up for that right away. I've enjoyed even before Titans came out, and as the Titans show progresses, I just started the newest episode, which was from this past Friday. Earlier today, I only got 5 or 10 minutes into it before I had to stop. I've enjoyed it, and it's getting stronger as that show goes on. But even before that, I never signed up for that to read the comics. Mm-hmm. I do want it, now that I have it, I do want them to grow that in a different way and present it rather than put stuff up, take stuff off. Put stuff up, take stuff. I'd rather see it be more of what a Marvel Universe has with their comics online. But I didn't get it for that originally. I wanted it for the TV shows, the movies, the things I could stream and watch. Because I don't own every DC cartoon. I don't have every Super Friends box set. I don't have every Justice League or Superman or Batman. Well, I do have Batman. But I don't have everything of all the other cartoons that are out there. And for the most part, just about everything's on there right now, including Batman Beyond. I think the old Adventures of Batman and Robin, where Adam West and Burt Ward do the voices, the Filmation ones.
The Filmation ones.
They're not there yet. Yeah. But the Ruby Spears Superman's on there. All the Super Friends are on there, which I started watching those again. I have enjoyed everything that I've been able to watch through that.
I have vague recollection of a episode of Super Friends that to this day I still wonder whether it was just a fever dream that my young mind invented. That involved like blue kryptonite or something like that, where they had all I really remember is that it is that they're Superman is dying and like the only way to stop it is to find this form of kryptonite that heals him versus kills him, and they're like going everywhere in the galaxy to find it. And I still don't know whether or not it was just a fever dream or not. I have to try and find that episode.
First appearance of Apache Chief.
I'll have to do some searching on that, Ian.
Yeah, because I only half remember it from watching it. It may have been when they would show that block on USA Network. Back when I was a kid.
Well, for years growing up, I thought the Universe of Evil episode was just a figment of my imagination because nobody I knew and watched Super Friends remembered it, and I'm like, well, I don't think I imagined it. I'm pretty sure. And then finally on that USA block or something, I saw it, and I found it is on the app. It's in season 4. That was the very first thing. Once I realized that all those were on there, because the first day it went live and I could watch it on my Apple TV, I'm scrolling through. I'm like, oh my God, the Super Friends are on here. So I start going through season. There it is. And that's the first thing I watched. Universe of Evil. Oh,
Nice.
fantastic episode.
Are the versions of the Batman the Animated Series the new versions, the HD editions, or are they the original?
That I don't know.
Okay,
And
because they just came out with the remaster. That's why I'm curious.
All those seasons aren't on yet. It's only Batman the Animated Series, not Batman and Robin, not the new adventures of Batman and Superman. Those are yet to come. I don't think all 3 seasons of Superman are on yet, but I'd have to double check that. But
Okay.
there's enough on there that, again, I don't own all of it, so I've been picking up and watching stuff, and I, for the 3rd time now, have watched Young Justice all the way through, getting ready, and I'm sure I'll try to squeeze it in again before The Outsiders comes on.
I mean, that show was was something that caught me by surprise.
Absolutely.
And I loved it. Even with that stupid jump from one season to the other, like 5 years later, and the whole alien thing, I was just like, what?
And that's where, so if you have Outsiders, fine, but I wouldn't mind some time in between that and see what happens. Because, man, to see Robin go to Nightwing, and you know there were Avengers in there, I would love to see it in that universe.
That show is so well done. It was just, I was like, wow.
I think they did some of those as comics, Shane, if I remember correctly.
Oh,
Like
really?
back when they were doing the Young Justice comics, I believe they touched on some stuff that bridges the gap in between the 2 seasons.
Okay.
You probably didn't read them because they were $4.99.
Well, I never picked those up. That's one of the few Justice League-ish kind of titles I didn't pick up, was that cartoon version of the comics. Huh.
I think that might have had some Mike Norton art on it, too, if I remember correctly.
Oh, wow.
I think it did, yeah.
Yeah.
No, we did an issue or 2 of Teen Titans Go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I actually have a page of that that he did from Teen Titans Go.
Oh. Speaking of animation, I've been watching a lot of anime lately, and which
Ian Perk's right up there.
well, you know, I've always enjoyed anime for quite some time, 20 years plus, and but it's so hit or miss for me, and until the streaming services came out, it was. You had to make a choice. Like, do I buy this and watch it, or do I, and now having Netflix and Hulu and having these anime series, I'm watching all these anime series, and I'm getting back into it, and I'm really enjoying them. And in regards to with superheroes, I watched Zetman, and that was really good. And one that I really just didn't, talk of like a Deadpool kind of thing is One Punch Man.
Oh, yes. I love One
phenomenal.
Punch Man so much.
I mean, never watched
Oh,
that.
dude, you got to watch it. It is a fun, awesome show. Great anime, and it's like a parody of and pokes fun at the industry, at the genre.
Yeah.
But it's still enjoyable. I mean, it's still it holds it. It's very akin to the Deadpool kind of thing that. And it's just because I remember reading about it, and I was just kind of like, well, this sounds dumb. It's about this guy who's so powerful that he literally can take people out or kill them with one punch. And I'm like, well, what's the fun in that? And
well, my favorite part about him is that. So, how did he get that way? He trained every day.
Yeah.
He did 100 push-ups. He did 150 sit-ups.
It's
he did
worth a
jumping
watch.
jacks for 50 minutes. Like all this ridiculously simple stuff, and somehow he became so powerful that his hair fell out.
It's fun. It's a fun show. I believe I thought at one point I saw there was 2 seasons, but I can only ever find 1 season. But
there were a couple of OVAs that came out on the Blu-ray set, and season 2 is coming soon. They're working on that right now.
Oh, I can't wait to watch it. It's fun as hell. And then I just finished watching Castlevania, both seasons of Castlevania.
That I want to start as well.
That's really good.
That looks good.
That is really good. And I just saw the second season just came out, and I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago they made the announcement that they've Netflix approved season 3 already.
Oh, good.
So they're going to go ahead with a season 3 on that. That is really good. Really good. Me being a video game nut, I mean, I played a Castlevania, but I was never like hooked in that series.
Yeah. No, me either.
But this show's awesome. It is really well done.
I got 2 suggestions for you.
All right.
Kevin. Tiger and Bunny. Tiger and Bunny is on Netflix now. It was originally on Hulu. It may still be on Hulu, but it's definitely on Netflix now. And Tiger and Bunny is about it's a world with superheroes in it.
Yeah, isn't the one green like armor? Yeah, yep. I have it in my list actually. I haven't watched it yet, but yeah, I have it in my list.
It's really good. It's sort of a dissection of the superhero genre in a different way than what One Punch Man does it.
Okay.
In this, there's basically a reality show involving superheroes where with each stopping of crime they get points on the board. and the lowest ranked hero at the time, who if memory serves, his name was Tiger, gets paired up with this new guy. And they're forced to become a team, and that's how Tiger and Bunny starts.
Interesting. All right, cool. Well, I have it on my list, so now that I have a recommendation for it, I'm anxious to check it out.
And the other one that I'll recommend, it's coming out in December. I was actually just at an anime convention this last weekend in New York. Anime NYC was this last weekend at the Javits Center.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, literally half the size of New York Comic Con. That's how big the Javits is, and that's how, even though this was the quote unquote biggest in New York, you go to New York Comic Con and you feel like you're at something that's like in a basement in comparison.
Yeah.
But this one, I saw the first 2 episodes of an anime called High Score Girl, which is going to be premiering in December on Netflix. And it's about a girl who plays fighting games, and the boy who loses to her, and in the process becomes her friend, and sort of their rivalry begins from there. And I watched the first 2 episodes. It was coming out as a manga, and they were forced to stop coming out with it because they were using licensed characters in the manga, and Capcom wanted to stop them from doing that, even if they were just referencing them. Yeah. And they had to go to court to settle that, and they then started the manga again. They're using the licensed characters, so it came to a positive agreement. And in the anime, it's very much based around the launch of Street Fighter 2. And how she's this girl who's in a crowd full of guys older and younger who are all losing to her, and it's a lot of fun. Second episode takes place where they're trying to track down this mythical arcade that only costs 10 yen to go to, so it's basically the equivalent of like a 25-cent arcade. Mm-hmm. And I dig it a lot. I've only watched the first 2 episodes at the con, but it'll all be out on Netflix in December.
Cool. Definitely. Awesome. That's great. That's why I said, I mean, for me, with anime, it's like I do. It's like when I don't have periods of time where I don't watch it, and then I have to start inquiring, to get references to decide if it's something, because I don't want to sit down and start watching 2-3 episodes of something and then not enjoy it. Yeah. I there's so much out there. It's kind of like, it's nice to be able to kind of hone your attention to, certain things and trying certain things that at least, you think might be something in your wheelhouse that you might enjoy.
Yeah.
But I'm watching Ajin right now. Have you ever seen that? You know what that is?
I haven't. No. That's
pretty cool. It's the concept is that basically, I forget how many there are now. I'm still watching the first season, but it's a rarity. But there are certain people that when they die, they're resurrected, so they can never die, and it's a rarity, and you'll never know until you die. So,
interesting.
And I thought, at first it was an interesting concept, and I thought it might get boring after a while. But now, as the season went on, they've taken it into different directions, and now there's these beings that can be produced, and I guess what I'm finding out now is you can actually, learn to try to control them. But when you see these people die, it's almost like they don't dissolve; they just die, and then you see like these almost like black, ashy, like resonating from their body, and then they'll come back to life. Well, now that you're seeing these beings, these entities are called IBMs, invisible black matter. And now they're associated with these Ajins, so they actually can control these beings and they have abilities, So it's taken it to a whole different direction. And then you're also finding out, like I'm in the episodes I'm watching now, is that they're I think there's only 47 known in the world at this time, and they're being hunted down because they're being sold to companies to be able to, like, especially for like military and stuff like that, to try out, weapons or things because they can't die. So they try. Oh, well, this will kill somebody. Okay, well now he come. So it's like, like what an idea. So it's like they keep adding on and adding another layer, another element to it. So it's got me intrigued, and the animation is just phenomenal. So it's just that's what I'm watching right now. But
there's apparently a live action film also. That was released in Japan. I don't know if it ever made its way here, but
some of those are hit or miss. Like I watched the Death Note one. And it was all right. I mean, to take a whole series like Death Note and put it into one movie like that, it was not an easy task. But I could watch it and enjoy it.
It's not a spoiler to say it didn't feel like Death Note to me until the last 5 minutes.
Well, I mean, and I can understand that. But I mean, somebody that's never watched Death Note,
sure,
they can watch it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Watchmen thing. You know what I mean? It's like you're either a diehard because you read everything, and it or it's you're not that familiar with it, and you can go in and watch it and enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I can see that.
Well, if you ever get sucked in enough, there's this service called VRV out there that is a streaming service that covers Crunchyroll, so you can log in to Crunchyroll at the same time as VRV. It also has all of the old Nickelodeon shows, animated and live action. So you can watch Doug and Our Real Monsters and Rugrats and all that stuff. And it has Boomerang.
Wow.
Yeah,
interesting.
And yeah, that's I think $8 a month if you're willing to pay for that.
See, that's the thing. That's the thing that's starting to get me. With all these freaking apps, coming out, I'm like, now you're going to start screwing this industry up now too. You know, it's like I'm not buying all these freaking apps. I'm like, I'm not going to buy a Disney app and a DC app and this app and that app. I'm like, you're going too far with it.
I have the DC app, and I can see myself getting the Disney app because there's not only all the Disney, all the Marvel, all the Star Wars. There will always be something on there to watch. But yeah, beyond that, how far does it go? Every channel gets its own app.
Everybody's doing their own app. I'm like, come on now, that's
Disney has me hook, line, and sinker. I'm sorry, you're giving me a Loki show. You're giving me a Star Wars show. Yep. You're giving me a prequel to Rogue One.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving me the Mandalorian. You're giving me all the access to the old
Aren't they doing
to the movies and TV. They're going to get my money.
And especially Jon Favreau developing the Mandalorian show.
Yeah.
Aren't they doing a Winter Soldier Falcon show too?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, they are.
Like a miniseries?
Yeah. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm intrigued. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, if I'm going to be paying $8 a month for every goddamn app,
at some point that'll get saturated.
Yeah,
and I won't
it's
be able
just
to
like
do
the
it.
comics. You're like, okay, I got to cut something here, So
I'm going to cut the cord on cable to save money. How many different streaming apps do you have? Well, I have about 15.
I have not had cable for over 2 years now, and all I have is I have Vudu, I have Hulu, and I have Netflix. Mm-hmm. And that's what I watch. And I'm able to watch a good majority of stuff that I want to watch by having those things. If I got to start buying every app for $8 for a month, I'm sorry, you're just kind of like undermining, the whole system as far as I'm concerned. But
do you know the disc to digital trick with Vudu?
You can take it to Walmart, right?
No.
Well, no. The way it works, you have to do it from your own home. But if you pull up a UPC for a DVD on your own computer, it'll read it as if it's a regular UPC, and it'll come up on your phone as if you're looking at the actual Blu-ray itself, and then you only have to pay $2 for the digital copy.
Okay. I have to check that out because I did use some of the digital codes to add to my Vudu library, but then I also had a couple that didn't allow me to do it.
Yeah, same. It's hit or miss, but I got all the Raimi Spider-Man that way.
Wow.
I got all the Harry Potter films that way. I got Scott Pilgrim that way. Star Trek. and a couple others.
I mean, it's like if it's like if you want to, because I think it was actually Disney Marvel ones that I had trouble with, like Thor: The Dark World and Winter Soldier, and I'm like, come on now, if I buy a DVD, if I'm going to make that investment, a Blu-ray, and then it's going to tell me I get a free digital copy to be able to watch whenever I want on my computer and whatever. And then I go to enter the code, and it's like, oh, you can't enter it. It's like you have to do it through iTunes. And I'm like, well, I'm not subscribing to iTunes so I can have a digital version of the movie. And
now I already had iTunes, so everything went to iTunes except all the Warner Brothers stuff. They would only go through something else. I think I used Flickster at one point, and then that went dead and got merged in with Vudu. So then Vudu allowed me to link to my iTunes account. So now I have all of my movies that I could possibly have
I've gone
across everything. Yeah, it's crazy. But the things that were only in Vudu can now go through iTunes, and the things I had only in iTunes now show up in Vudu. So it for me, it worked out. Everything is on both platforms.
I feel like you need one of those crazy person boards.
Yeah.
You have to, because I'm just like looking at Shane and I'm like, I'm lost.
Yeah. The Warner Brothers side went through 2 or 3 different apps until it's now settled. Disney closed up their one app that I had stuff through, but you could link that to iTunes, and it's finally down to just a couple now.
See, to me, I was like, again, that's one of those things I feel like Deemer. It's like it shouldn't even be, like exclusive. Like if it's a digital version, it's a digital version.
Absolutely.
Whichever service you have, you should be able to use that code.
I agree.
Almost every film company is a part of Movies Anywhere now.
Yeah.
And it links to everybody, but that Disc Digital doesn't work with Disney because Disney never signed up for Disc Digital with Vudu. The only Marvel movie you can get that way, and I found this out the hard way, is The Incredible Hulk. That's it. Because it's under Universal.
Yeah.
And Universal signed up for Disc Digital. So
even the Fox ones then too, like X-Men and stuff?
No,
tried
Fox
those?
ones work.
Oh, they do work? Okay. So anyone that's not exclusively Disney Marvel, then you could do it, but all the ones that are exclusive Disney Marvel, you can't.
Yep, yeah, because my Blu-ray copy of the Wolverine, even though it was the extended edition, only came with the digital copy for the regular movie. So I got the digital copy of the extended edition via this digital hack.
Okay. So I'll have to try that out. I knew there is, different ways to do stuff, and I've heard stuff like that, but I never heard details enough to be able to understand it and try it. So I'll have to give it a whirl.
And if you didn't go cross-eyed during that conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
I have cable. I have cable. I have cable. I'm broke but not confused. Hey!
And you watch VHS. Hey!
And DVDs.
Nice.
And on that musical note.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any further input here, gentlemen? Any other topics to consider?
I think that's enough.
I'm good.
All right, then. I guess we've stuffed this turkey just as far as she'll go. It has been a marathon session tonight, gents, but I've enjoyed every moment of it.
Absolutely. Yes, this is great.
Yes.
This is a great time. Great time.
Yes. Ian, sir, thank you very much for giving over a couple hours of your holiday week to be with us on the line here tonight.
Absolutely my pleasure. And I want to, since it is Thanksgiving week, I want to say thank you guys for over 10 years of friendship and ways to kill time while on the subway.
Thank you.
More than a pleasure, Ian.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about anniversaries, a special shout out to the Lantern Cast, another one of our sister podcasts who just turned 10 years themselves.
Wow.
Nice.
Right.
Wow.
I'm sure they'll have some good things to say about Grant Morrison's The Green Lantern as well on there. So,
Or will they?
congratulations to the whole Lantern Cast crew.
That's
And
cool.
on a slightly more somber note, a remembrance to Mr. Eric Martin, who passed away a couple of years ago as of yesterday. So that came up on my Facebook feed and reminded me of that. So, the fallen are remembered, and their previous episodes are all available still online. So, that's the way we get to remember people, is the internet.
Sure.
Yes, it does confer a measure of immortality, does it not?
Yes.
Yes, sure does.
Yes. To Jamie D as well.
Exemplifies the family.
Yes.
The large family that, has been created. So.
Yep. Speaking of freaking cancer, Jamie D is present in spirit here at this Thanksgiving table with us.
Sure.
Yep. Shit, isn't it? Yep.
His pimp hand remains strong. All right, folks, time to push back our chairs and waddle the can. This meal is over. Shane, you ready to be Shane?
Yep. Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com to send us an email. The address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. To leave a voicemail, the number is 267-702-6642. I still have not updated this part. To go to the forums, go to
thecomicforums.vanillacommunity.com.
and let us know what you think of all the topics we discussed here, Green Lantern, Stan Lee, and all the superfluous things we added into it.
Those are the fun things.
Those are the fun things. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. Thanks to everyone who contributes to the show. Thanks, Kevin, for coming. Thanks, Ian, for always coming. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.
Uniting the world's mightiest heroes. This is Comic Geek Speak.
Excelsior!